Beats music. Wave Beats music. Wave Beats music.
Predictions that we don't change that many minds, and that they're both going to try and turn down each other's base's enthusiasm. There's not a lot of swing voters to be had through a debate. Debates don't have a big impact on people's opinions. It can probably affect enthusiasm. I'm not sure. Not sure how this is going to turn out, to be honest.
Well, I mean, to be quite honest, you are right. I mean, most of the statistical evidence shows that generally speaking, debates don't change a lot of minds, but of course it still does have, I mean, some sort of symbolic impact, if you will.
We're going through
And-
the motions of democracy.
In a way,
Yeah.
that's true. Now, my personal take is that a lot of people are sort of looking at Joe Biden, looking at sort of his mental state, and saying that, you know, he's going to implode, he's going to blow up, Trump is going to slaughter him. And personally, I don't really see it that way. I think that Joe Biden, you know, whatever they've got him on, clearly seems to be working. And I think he can keep up 2 hours, you know, against Trump. It's not going to be a blowout one way or the other. I think it's going to be a tie in the end. And the Democrats are going to think that Joe Biden won, and the Republicans are going to think that Trump won.
Basically. And speaking of what they've got him on, according to Giuliani, they've been putting Joe Biden on stimulants. Giuliani, for international viewers, is the former New York mayor during 9/11. And he's a big Republican mouthpiece. And he went on the cable news rounds today saying that the Democratic campaign, the Biden campaign, has him hopped up on Adderall and he uses an earpiece. And that's been the talking point for the GOP today. And it's been trending on Twitter. So,
well, I mean,
it's
to be
interesting.
honest, that probably is true to some extent. But I mean, let's be honest, how coherent has Trump been at his rallies? I mean, he slurs his words, but I guess we're kind of used to it. So we kind of give Trump a free pass.
You know, it's funny. My dad, when we were watching the debates like so many years ago, Trump kept sniffing like, and my dad's like, "This guy's on cocaine. This guy just is not normal. He looks wired." And then I was like, you know, you're right. He might just be like really in stimulants, and he's got a lot of energy for both. I mean, Trump particularly has a lot of energy for like a 70-something-year-old.
That is true. That is true.
But that's
Trump,
all speculation, fake news, you know.
Yeah, I guess Joe Biden is a bit like low energy Jeb in a sense.
They ran an ad. They ran an ad recently called "Keeping Up," and it showed Joe Biden running, and it shows that they're trying to show Joe Biden as someone who can, with a lot of vigor and energy and vitality.
Wow.
And that's kind of the Joe Biden campaign's kind of countering that narrative that he's a low energy candidate.
No, that is true. Now, I think if there's any prediction for how the debate will go, I think I would look to one of the recent town halls that Joe Biden had in, I think it was in the state of Pennsylvania. And there he really, I mean, I'm no fan of Joe Biden really, but he convincingly actually put on the sort of working class Joe act that he has. Honestly, I was personally surprised because in most cases, Joe Biden has seemed a little bit aloof. I mean, we all know he got into fights with union workers. So I'm personally surprised that he's been able to actually look a little bit down to earth of late.
He had a really nice talking point. He said, "I see this election as between Scranton and Wall Street."
Exactly.
And that was just a good line.
No, but personally, that's I think he really did well. In that sense, I think he's made fewer of the mistakes that Hillary Clinton made in the sense of coming across as sort of an arrogant elitist. I mean,
Macron effect, right?
In terms of policy, he doesn't offer that much more than Hillary Clinton, to be quite honest. However, I think in terms of optics, he does offer a little bit more. And in that sense, I think on several of the issues that are going to be discussed tonight, he does have the advantage. Because I think, as far as I know, there are about 6 topics that are going to be discussed tonight. So number 1 is both the records of both Trump and Biden. Number 2 is the Supreme Court, COVID-19, coronavirus, the economy, race relations and the protests, and then, of course, the integrity of the election.
Election integrity will be a big one. The tax returns are probably going to dominate the conversation in the beginning. That's my prediction. I can see one of the moderators asking a question like, "Mr. President, you said you'd run the country like a business, but you were operating at losses for years according to your recently released tax returns." And then Trump's going to say something along the lines of, "Well, I always said I was the king of debt." He's going to say something along the lines, he's been gaming the system, he wants to change the system so people like him can't take those tax exemptions. He said something like that on the last campaign round. And I didn't think that was a bad strategy to say like, "Hey, people like me shouldn't be able to do this." He might go that route again. That'd be interesting.
No, I mean, he's going to say, like he said before, I'm smart. And to be quite honest, basically, I think the tax returns will have basically no impact on the election. Basically, Trump's people will justify it as, well, you know, he was smart enough to do it. He's gaming the system. The system is built that way, which, I mean, to some extent is actually correct.
He's not doing anything really illegal. That's the real problem.
Exactly. He's following the law. It's the law that is the problem. The law is the problem.
And they'll say, like, "Hey, it's Joe Biden and like them who passed these the tax code." Trump just entered the system like that. So if anything, it seems, even to me, it seems like the fact that Trump got away with all that is more damning to the party establishment than Trump.
In some sense, but you know, at this point, basically almost everything that happens in the election will have no impact. Everything is totally partisan. Everything is totally divided. So whatever happens that's negative for Trump's people will justify it, and the Democrats will assume that it's bad. And so at this point, I don't think there's really much that will swing the election. I mean, look at Trump's approval rating over the last 4 years. It's basically stayed stable in the mid to low 40s, and it hasn't really changed. And to be quite frank, the election, it's going to be simply a matter of turnout. You're not going to convince Trump people. You're not going to convince Biden people. Everyone is voting to stop the other side from taking power. People are not voting on principle or policy.
It's negative polarization. It's you're basically trying to stop the other party from winning. Pretty low enthusiasm for the candidates, but this is important to know that I don't think they're as unpopular as Trump and Hillary both were in 2016. I think Trump is more popular than he was. I might be wrong there, but Biden is certainly more popular than Clinton. He's much less unfavorable.
Exactly, the unfavorability rate. And basically, from what I've seen so far in the polls, the people who hate both Biden and Trump are going for Biden. So in that sense, Biden has the advantage because, of course, last time the people who hated Clinton and Trump went for Trump. And so in many ways, if you look at the numbers, in a fair and square fight, Joe Biden has a higher chance of winning. But as we both know, I think, and as I've discussed on the channel multiple times, this is not going to be a clean fight. There are going to be issues in terms of election integrity.
Well, it's interesting because I have no doubt there's going to be litigation, but with Biden's lead in the states that matter and the number of states he's leading in, it would take quite a few issues to cut into that lead. He's leading by 6 points in many of these cases. 6 points is different than Hillary Clinton's 2-point leads. It's just way different.
I agree. But if you look at the polls, all these polls have a margin of error. So again, assume that it's 2.5, 3 points lower than that. And then if you consider the fact that, tactics like voter purging, things to do with the mail-in ballots, voter suppression, all of these things, as long as Trump and the Republican Party in general are able to shave off a couple of tens of thousands votes here, a couple of tens of thousands votes there, they can actually affect the outcome of the election. Again, as long as it's somewhat close, voter suppression can affect the election. Of course, if it's a blowout, even that won't matter. But if you consider the fact that all these polls have a margin of error, so actually Biden's lead could be smaller than it is, and then you consider the fact that voter suppression shaves off a couple of votes, you end up with a situation actually much closer to what it was in 2016. And so I wouldn't bet on anything 100%.
I think we all have, some trauma from 2016, and I think everyone's very cautious. And I think we've maybe erring on the side of irrational pessimism. But you're right. But if they did some pretty sophisticated modeling, 538, Nate Silver, and they ran a simulation, Trump wins. Basically, they run like a bunch of simulations of like the election given the priors. Trump wins 1 in 5.
Is it 1 in 5? I thought it was around 70 something percent that Joe Biden wins.
Recently, I saw it was like Trump wins 1 out of 5 scenarios. I can look at it again. 538.
I mean, it is possible. It is possible, but remember again that these are similar. Not that the model is the same, but these are similar numbers to what was predicted for Trump in 2016. So it's not.
I mean,
it's not surefire.
People forget, like, it's not that the polls were that wrong. We could just be living in the timeline that was like the one where it happened. It just doesn't mean that the polls were that bad. The polls weren't as bad as people say they were.
No, I agree with that. Look, the national polls were actually correct.
Yeah.
The national polls predicted a 3-point lead for Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton won by 2 percentage points.
Yep.
It was only the state polls. It was the fact that the media focused on the national polls instead of the state polls.
Yeah.
And the fact that 1 or 2, I think it might have been, was it in the state of Michigan or one of these other states, that there was one state where the polls were actually off?
Yeah. College educated voters were overrepresented.
Exactly.
In the sample.
Exactly.
So that was a big issue.
Actually, Al Jazeera actually released a video today, which was very interesting about, can we trust the polls? And they discuss exactly these issues. And they contacted a guy, I forgot his name, perhaps you know him, but he's the man, he has this theory called the keys to the election. And basically
the 13 keys, right?
Exactly, the 13 keys to the election. And basically Trump only has 6 out of the 13 keys, which means that according to that theory, and this guy, by the way, predicted that Trump won in 2016.
Yeah.
So he's been accurate so far, predicted every president since 1984.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the keys, Trump is losing according to his prediction for 2020.
I think by any metric, if anyone looked at this and 2016 didn't happen, they'd be predicting a blowout of Trump. I think any other like year, if 2016 had happened to us, the pollsters, the modelers, the forecasters, the keys guy, it does not look good for Trump.
No, exactly.
I think
No, I
yeah.
agree in some sense. There is a little bit of an overcorrection. I think most people, because of the trauma of 2016, they're very, very, very hesitant to say, "Oh no, Trump will lose. Don't worry, guys," because of course, the danger of getting it wrong this time is sort of
Horrifying.
even more. It's even more dramatic. So, and personally, as I've discussed, multiple times on the channel, essentially the chance of a disputed election is quite high. So even if in the overall numbers, Joe Biden is quite likely to win, as I've said before, the mail-in ballots overwhelmingly, something in the ballpark of 70% of the mail-in ballots are Democrats. So there is a very high chance that in specific states where mail-in ballots are not counted early, they're counted over the period of several days, certain states will be initially predicted for Trump and could switch to Biden as the mail-in ballots come in. And that in itself is a situation in which, sort of Trump could, first of all, declare an early victory and then dispute the results of the election, even if the entire process itself is legitimate and smooth, which again, because so many people are voting by mail, sort of unprecedented. This has never happened before, except in a few states. Even if it goes perfectly, the situation is still likely to sort of become very chaotic.
We're lucky that, well, maybe I'm being optimistic, that the media seems to be exercising some discipline about calling the results this year.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are saying like, hey, it's very likely that we won't be able to call it November 3rd. I think even the AP was saying like, we're going to wait a little longer than usual. I think the AP is usually the standard for who calls them, right?
Yeah.
The Associated Press. And I think that I don't know if like Fox News is going to be rogue this time. I don't think that they can get away with that. I think that most people are watching the cable news, and cable news will be reporting who's declaring victory. And I hope that they're responsible with how they're reporting the results and contextualizing whatever the campaigns claim by saying like, the mail-in ballot situation, the fact that the vote count's not over, that, we can't really make full calls yet. It depends on how Americans perceive this election is determined by the media.
No, I agree very much that it's going to be a very strange election night because, of course, traditionally people start calling the states, everyone is watching each state. And in this election night, if the media is responsible, they will essentially be saying, well, half of these states we can't call until several days from now, just wait, which is kind of the total opposite of what the media wants to do. I mean,
yeah, it is. It's a horse race. It's like
exactly. That
they
entire element is missing. I mean, personally, I was considering perhaps to do on this channel a live stream of the American election day, but that might not even be a good idea because the results might not even come on this day. By the way, guys, if you would like to see a live stream of the election day, comment in the chat below. Just comment yes or comment anything. Feel free to ask us questions as well. That would be great as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, yeah, the media has a big role to play on how Americans respond to this election. Thoughtful anchors, thoughtful broadcasters are going to contextualize the results, make sure that people don't expect the results on election night. It's going to be a nonstop news cycle for about a few weeks, probably, because it's going to be like recounts. Well, first it's going to be like mail-in ballots being counted. A lot of state Supreme Courts basically passed rulings saying that they had to accept any mail-in ballots postmarked November 3rd. I think Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, they had something like they extended by a few days up to November 9th for a few states. So like vote count won't be done in critical swing states for like 6 days after.
Wow.
And usually you don't need all the votes to call it because there's statistical inference, right? And like just like at some point the lead is too big. But if you guys want to know something interesting, in 2000, the major cable news stations like CNN called Florida wrong, right? They gave it to Gore initially, they gave it to Bush.
Yeah.
And then Gore had to call and retract his concession.
Exactly.
And if you can imagine something like that happening in 2020,
Well,
that'd be a
it won't
disaster.
happen because Hillary Clinton explicitly stated to Joe Biden, do not concede under any circumstances. I mean, this is fiery language. Let's
Yeah,
not
I
forget
know.
the Democrats are also fiery, not just Trump, not just Trump.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that the context she said that in is wait. I don't know why she had to say it like that. I don't think that was a responsible thing to say. I think what she meant to say is like, don't concede it until everything's sorted out. Like, concede under any circumstance. I don't know. Like, that doesn't seem right to me. Like, under some circumstances, he should concede. Like,
I mean, yes, but
if
it
she
kind of
make
sort
the
of
phone call on election night,
yeah.
he shouldn't make a phone call on election night.
No,
he should
no.
not do that. That's a bad idea. I don't
No,
think he plans to.
because it's extremely likely that not all the votes, especially the mail-in votes, will not be in on election day. And the scary thing, of course, is, I mean, if it was mail-in votes in Wyoming or California, it wouldn't matter. But it's in key swing states. I think, is it Pennsylvania, Michigan, these Rust Belt states? Many of them have mail-in votes that will not be counted on election day.
And there's an investigation in Pennsylvania, or at least some controversy, because 9 military ballots were found discarded. And DOJ, Trump's DOJ, made a big deal of publicizing that. So, you know what's going to probably start happening, and Project Veritas did this today, is that there's going to be small irregularities that happen every election cycle, right? Like, these things aren't crazy. People have to understand, like, when you see stories like 9 ballot problems, some crazy video of some ballot harvesting thing, these are not okay, but these are like micro level things that happen and get investigated and get corrected. But by running these stories disproportionately, you're priming the public to doubt the election results on election night and to be able to be contested. So when DOJ came out with that 9 ballot story in Pennsylvania, the military ballots, and made a point to point out that 7 of them were Trump votes. That was DOJ acting as a political arm of Trump's campaign to start priming people to doubt the election results. And there's a reason Project Veritas released that video about ballot harvesting today or yesterday night against Ilhan Omar's campaign. That was a video from like the primaries. Why'd they sit on it so long?
Wow.
They sat on it to release it around now before the debate.
Exactly.
They are timing this to overwhelm people with this sense that there's massive fraud going around by choosing selective stories and running them. So people by November 3rd will already be doubting what's going to happen.
Exactly. And that's a recipe for disaster, because of course, if Trump or, whichever way, honestly, declares that the election is rigged right off the election results, or there are irregularities, or the mail-in ballots don't all come in on election day, that could lead to a dangerous situation. Because look, we already have social unrest. We already have militias coming onto the streets. I discovered this. I talked about this in my Civil War video. There's protests. Some of them are riots. There's a situation for potential civil unrest. And actually, to add on to that, maybe you can elaborate, and I'll answer as well. Justin C is asking, if Trump refuses to concede after Biden wins the election, can't the military step in to remove Trump from office?
Yep. Honestly, I don't think I don't like these kind of, it's like, what if, like the media's like, well, what if he doesn't concede? What if he doesn't that? What if he doesn't even leave office? Like, it's like, okay, like at that point we're getting like, we're just putting ideas in people's heads. But I don't think it's going to get to that level. If anything, like, it's not going to be forcible removal. It's going to be like, it's just going to be lots of litigation, and whoever wins litigation is probably going to have to leave. Yeah. Or whoever wins litigation is going to become president, rather, not leave. I don't think we're going to have a situation where Trump forcibly stays in the White House and the military has to escort him out. I don't think that the people in his campaign will stand for that, and the people around him, because the people around him aren't trying to go to prison either.
Well, some of them have already gone to prison.
Yeah, no. That's kind of hyperbolic. That's a little dramatic. I mean, like, it's fun. It's a fun idea to imagine him leaving in cuffs, but I doubt it.
No, I mean, it is true. At the end of the day, look, Trump is going to be president until, is it January 22, 21?
Inauguration is like somewhere in late January, yeah.
Exactly. So in any case, even if there's a whole, crazy stuff going on and Trump refuses to concede, at the end of the day, he is president until January. So
that's a lot of time just to do some crazy
at worst, even if the military would get involved, they would only get involved in January. And at the end of the day, I think if push really came to shove, I don't think they would have to escort him. I think if at some point, if it's January 22, the morning, before the inauguration, and Trump is like, I don't want to leave, at some point, the generals would just say to him, look, listen, if you don't leave, we will escort you. And I think the embarrassment of being escorted would be enough incentive, I think, for Trump to voluntarily leave. At the end of the day, I don't think it's going to come to that. I think the more dangerous thing really is that while Trump is president, he tries to derail the process. So while he's president, he incites violence. He incites the militias to come onto the streets. Of course, many leftists will be on the streets protesting at that point already. And basically, the police, which they've already done multiple times, will stand down and allow the militias to move in and confront the protesters, which is inevitably going to lead to, violent outbreaks. That's really the danger.
That's like a given that there's going to be protests no matter what. That's not even a question. Like whatever happens, there's going to be mass protests of this election after November 3rd. As far as the transition, people also forget, like, there's a lot of bureaucratic continuity and like character and like autonomy that people neglect. There's a transition team. There's like a whole thing that starts around now, actually, where they start preparing teams to, in the case that there's a transition of power, like infrastructure is laid out very early, and the people who do that are, career bureaucrats and federal workers, and they're not all bad people. they have a vested interest in doing their job. Well, I don't think Trump, the good thing about a developed country like America is that we have strong bureaucratic traditions, and like it takes a long time to rot that away, right?
Well, I mean, how developed is America really? I mean, half the bureaucratic positions have not even been filled by Trump.
I'm on the list. Get out of here.
You guys didn't see that. No, but half the bureaucratic positions, that's the crazy thing. In the Trump administration, there's huge bureaucratic positions that have not been filled up. I mean, it's crazy. There's empty roles. So yeah, I mean, in some areas, there's not even a transition.
You're right. My friend's mom works for the EPA, and she was telling me how like his failure to fill like some top seats or like some just positions, and the failure of like just to staff the bureaucracy, especially in the State Department. There's a whole book about this with Ronan Farrow, War on Peace. It's just causing so much dysfunction and confusion. Like people don't know what they're reporting to. It's just like you're just gutting these places. You're just gutting them.
Wow.
Just by not filling positions. It's really nuts what's going on.
Now this is kind of crazy about sort of this.
Sorry, but I was just saying like there's a reason that federal workers don't like Trump. They don't like him. Like the federal workforce, the people who staff the bureaucracy in DC. I mean, you can look at the whole thing. Like look at the Republicans in DC, like the Muellers, the Comeys, the DOJ, the FBI, right? They're not Trump loyalists. A lot of them are Republicans, but a lot of the swamp people are just, even if they're Republicans, they don't like the guy. I know people, because I live in Northern Virginia. I know people who work, in like the State Department and stuff. They don't like the guy. The culture is very against him. Yeah.
No, that is true, because this almost seems to be the strategy on the right, but even more under Trump. It's like you tell people that government is bad, and so you simply you don't let government work, just defund it, make sure it doesn't work. And then, at some point people will say, well, you see, government is not working, so we have to cut it. That's the strategy. Destroy government. And then people will say, you see, government sucks.
That's the strategy since before Trump.
I mean, yeah, of course. But it's more naked, it's more open, and it's more egregious. I mean, in many ways, if you look at just the hard policy, Trump is actually not that different from a lot of Republicans, and let's be honest, to some extent, some Democrats. I mean, the surveillance state was there under Obama. The wars, we're involved, America's involved in 7 or 8 wars. 2 of them started under Bush, 5 under Obama. And he still got the Nobel Peace Prize for it, which is ridiculous, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and it's funny because the whole, you're right, it is very naked. Bannon, I think, said something like they're trying to dismantle the regulatory state, or like the deep state, rather. Like they said that's the goal, is to gut it, is to just like dissolve it. And that's been the agenda of this administration since the beginning. Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy, pretty nuts.
It's all a little bit crazy, but to what extent do you think this will all, feature in the discussion on Trump's record and Biden's record? I mean, to be quite honest, I try to follow these things very well, but honestly, so much happens with the Trump administration that you honestly you can't remember. I can't remember everything that's happened because so much happens, and it happens every day. There are some scandals where people tell me, and I'm like, "Oh wait, did that actually happen? That
No,
happened? That's crazy."
I was telling my friend about this because, like, the Gilded Age in American history is a lot of we're at like a second Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was like was endemic corruption as well, right? And I'm gonna Google something really quick. Okay, it was actually the Roaring '20s, so my bad. But there's a thing called Teapot Dome, right? And it's in American history. It was under Warren G. Harding, and it's one of the biggest corruption scandals we learn about in school. And we were talking about, like, what's going to be the Teapot Dome kids in the future learn about, right? Because what's the one thing that historians, like textbook writers, can pick from this administration? There's too many.
Cool. Wow. I mean, because that's the crazy thing. If we think about sort of the most nakedly corrupt president in modern history, people think about Richard Nixon. And
right?
he had like one big scandal.
We had a couple. There's like bombings in Cambodia and stuff.
True, but let's
Vietnam
be
was a big
fair.
thing.
No one cares about that because it's brown people being bombed, which is really sad.
It is sad,
But
yeah.
which is sad, yeah. But at the end of the day, which I don't even know all the scandals that happened under Trump. They're every day.
I guess we can find them. Like, I guess there was obviously Helsinki. That wasn't really a scandal. It was like a thing he said that was pretty bad. Ukraine, withdrawing troops was on the behest of Erdogan. That was pretty bad. People were pretty upset about that.
Oh yes.
I couldn't even begin. I forget. Not releasing his tax returns. These tax returns.
This is the latest one, but there'll probably be one next week as well.
Stormy Daniels. Witness tampering.
No, to be honest, the Stormy Daniels, I don't think anyone cares, and I don't care. That's okay. Maybe not good for his wife, but it's not a matter of state, let's say. It's not a matter of state. And I think the Democrats were extremely silly to think that Stormy Daniels would be the thing to take him down.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it had to do with the whole Cohen thing. That was the timing, was when Cohen was giving a testimony. And it was about, like, because it was, my understanding, it was like the way they funneled the money was dishonest.
That's quite possible. I get that, but at the end of the day, it's sort of minor. And I think most of the allure of that scandal was, there's a porn star involved and all of that. I think the focus was more on the porn star aspect than the money aspect.
Yeah. So this is what it was. It was campaign. It was characterizing the charge as an excessive campaign contribution. The $130,000 that Cohen gave Stormy Daniels. That's why it was a big deal. It wasn't just because of the porn star. It was like dishonest as hell.
Exactly. Now, and this is typical. They've funneled money all sorts of places, and
yes, fake charities. There's a lot of that, like
of the Trump chat. It's almost funny to think that people were still concerned. Remember back in 2015 when everyone was talking about Trump University and how that was a scam.
That's a big deal. It's like a big deal. He has scammed so many contractors. I actually had a friend's grandfather in New Jersey.
Wage theft, yes.
He has, what he'll do. My friend's grandfather told me this. Like, he'll hire out contractors for like a project, right? And then he'll go bankrupt, and then like a bunch of people will just not get paid.
Yep.
And then he basically puts other people out of business. Exactly. So he's been doing this. He doesn't pay undocumented workers. He's just done this his whole life. He's cheated people his whole life. And that should be a bigger deal than it is, actually.
No, actually, this is almost kind of funny because in the context of sort of the whole Black Lives Matter thing, a lot of people were sort of talking about, we talk about crime and then, theft. And then, people, of course, talk about, quote unquote, black crime. And then people, talk about basically poor people stealing things. But one of the interesting things actually was that basically, if you look at the total, dollar value of what poor people stealing, if we talk about, the total value of burglaries is actually significantly lower than the total value of wage theft. Yet if you're a burglar, you go to jail. If you commit wage theft, at best, you just give the money back.
Or you have to go to court and you have to do a whole thing. And the burden's on the person to bring a suit to you. Like, what I'm trying to say?
Exactly.
That's crazy. The burden is on the person being stolen. Like, if you steal from a store, you're immediately, and they catch you, it's like, you're out. You know what I'm trying to say? There's no immediate remedy to wage theft. It's a process. That's the sad thing.
Exactly. And this was kind of highlighted in the sense, I mean, some people took a racial angle, but actually really it's a class angle in this sense that what you've got is that when poor people steal, they go to jail. When rich people steal, not really.
Yeah, not really at all.
And that's funny. And it's actually shocking sort of the degree to which wage theft can just happen. I mean, Trump committed wage theft, but he hasn't faced
And
consequences.
it's actually more subtle sometimes, you know, like just making people, like anyone who's worked retail in America or in a country like that has like us, like, you know, you'll be like, hey, stay back a little bit, you know, like 15 minutes, right? Like help us put the carts
Overtime.
away, you know, like, and it's like just like informal thing. They get the extra value from you, and you don't really think about it. You're like maybe a 16-year-old worker, you're undocumented, whatever, and you don't think much, like, okay, I'll help, you know, whatever. And you know that adds up. If I added up the amount of times I stayed after for Harris Teeter to like put
Exactly.
carts away, maybe it's a few hours, but like that's like money. That's like maybe say it's $15 an hour you're working for. It's not. It's probably $10, $30 stolen from some guy from a giant corporation. Like it's petty, but it adds up if you just do that across the board.
No, it really is true. I mean, overtime is definitely one of the biggest issues when it comes to workers.
Not giving
Many
people
workers.
legal breaks. Not giving people legal breaks is a big source of wage theft.
Personally, I mean, I was personal because I actually had a personal experience with it almost was wage theft. It took very long for me to be paid for some hours I did. It was a sort of separate contract. I mean, I won't get into details because I'm looking at the time actually, and we are, I believe, 5 minutes away from the start of the debate, guys.
It's exciting. Well, I'll give some people who are abroad some context about the news cycle today. Biden, Kamala Harris released their tax returns today, and that's a big deal.
Yes.
That's a big deal because Trump's tax returns were released a few days ago by the news, and he paid $750 in federal taxes for 2 of those years, which is really, really low. My parents pay so much more than that. I think my friends have paid more than that.
I think the vast majority of American citizens pay more taxes than Trump.
Undocumented immigrants probably pay more than that, which is funny because the whole narrative that they're leeches on the system, the social safety net, not true. They pay more into it than they take out. Trump, if anything, is a leech of the safety net and bankruptcy laws and the tax code and the exemptions and the deductions. People like him are the leeches. And I think that if they don't hammer that down, that talking point down as much as possible, that would just be silly. I think he is going to.
I agree. Like Joe Biden, now this is really the opportunity for Joe Biden to put on the act, the working class hero
populist act.
Exactly. If Joe Biden is like, yo, listen, guys, we're in a pandemic, we're in a global recession, and and he must point to the camera, you, the American people, are being forced to pay taxes, but this guy, Trump, who's supposed to be serving you, is refusing to even contribute. He's benefiting of the system. He is the swamp. If Joe Biden makes that argument, I think that's going to be powerful.
It would be wrong, hands down, it would be correct. It would be very good because no one's paying taxes.
Joe Biden could win the debate simply on that. I think if he makes the case clearly, he could win the debate off of that argument.
Yeah, he can definitely put on his populist hat. He's been trying it lately. I think I just saw a comment I wanted to mention. Jonathan Aquino said, don't forget he gave money to his daughter and then set it up as a tax write-off. That is so crooked. That shows exactly how business tax fraud works in America. You write off things as business expenses. Exactly. Anyone who's I'm not going to say who, but like, you know, people who are like, whose parents are independent contractors, like they like write off like, oh, they made their study, right? And they're like, oh, that's a business expense. Like they furnish their like home office. That's a business expense. Gas, business expense. And people do that pretty commonly here who have small businesses or are contractors, but like at Trump's level, that's a lot of fraud. That's just writing off personal expenses as business expenses is a big way to just avoid tax liability. Exactly. $70,000 for his hair. That's insane. That can't be true. How do you pay $70,000 to have hair that bad? It's not possible.
No, I mean, honestly, to some extent, almost everyone tries to do it, but I mean, these people become, of course, experts. I mean, they have whole, teams of lawyers and accountants who are able to, sort of.
The whole industry. There's a whole industry of tax consultants. Yeah. But even then, most people in his income bracket pay like much more than him. I read that with the Times article. Most people don't do what he did. So most people don't get away with that to that level. They still pay millions in taxes.
So any idea what sort of what were the biggest ways that he avoided taxes, or what were sort of the biggest write-offs? Because of course, I think Jonathan Aquino said he gave some to his daughter and made that as a write-off.
I think.
But what explains the millions? I mean, that explains a little bit, but
Well, I'm not a tax expert, but a lot of the reason is because the way we report income. He's operating at losses for one thing for so
Yeah.
long, and that kind of reduces tax liability because he doesn't have income. Amazon does something similar because they were always like reinvesting all their revenue and going in the red, which is part of the reason they don't have tax liability a lot of times. And then plus the corporate subsidies they get from states. So it's a weird system. Like if you're not making revenue, you're not paying taxes on it. So if you're operating in the red, you can not pay taxes on it. It's intuitive, right? That's why he called himself a king of debt, because he lives rich by being in debt.
yeah,
Okay, the
actually,
debate's starting, I think.
essentially, yeah, actually, I think we're about to start. We're about to
Excellent.
start.
Very exciting stuff.
I'm looking forward to it, guys. Guys, in the chat, just tell me if you think Biden is going to win. Type in Biden. If you think Trump is going to win, type in Trump.
When I was working 10 and I couldn't get any write-offs. See, that's the thing. You don't have a tax consultant, Jonathan. Like that's the problem. You don't have like armies of lawyers to do this for you.
We are just 15 seconds away now from
I
the
mean, like,
first presidential
I've tried.
debate of
I have to pay
2020.
taxes.
That is the
I
city
get
of
it back
Cleveland,
later.
Ohio.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
All right, guys, we are almost there. We are almost there.
This is an
Predictions?
ABC
Any predictions,
News special.
guys? Okay, Eric Krause says Biden will win. Biden will win. Honestly, personally, I think it's going to be a tie, guys. As I've said
With
before,
so much
whatever
on the
they've got
line,
Biden on
the wait
clearly
is
is
over.
working. I don't know
Donald
if they've got him on
Trump.
Adderall or
No
whatever
time
drugs.
before. Voters face they clear a choice between
All right, guys,
two
it's starting.
parties.
It's starting.
Joe
ABC News
Biden.
special.
Who we are as a nation,
The debate
what we
is
stand
starting.
for, most importantly, who we want to be. That's all on the ballot.
Face to face, the main event starts right now. The first presidential debate, live from Case Western Reserve University and Cleveland Clinic in Ohio and New York City. Now reporting, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good evening. Welcome back to our special coverage of this
All
first
right.
presidential debate. Just moments away now. Donald Trump and Joe Biden will take the stage for 90 minutes, 6 topics on the table.
They won't even shake
The big
hands.
question,
I
will
mean,
the candidates do
I wouldn't
personally, I
shake
think
that guy's
change
even
the
without
course of this
Corona, I
race?
don't think they would
President
shake
Trump
hands.
is
Let's be
behind
honest
right now,
here.
has been for months, and our statistics guru Nate Silver at 538 calculates that Joe Biden is coming into this debate season with a 78% chance of winning the White House. But there are 3
78%
debates,
chance
5
for
weeks to
Biden,
go,
okay.
and President Trump has a history of shaking things up. Our chief White House correspondent John Carl is on the scene in Cleveland.
George,
So
Donald
sorry.
Trump goes
Thank you so
into this
much.
debate with his back against the wall. By every publicly available measure,
Yes.
he is losing this race, trailing in the national polls, no consistent lead in any of the top dozen most competitive battleground states. He needs to change the dynamic of this race, and tonight is the best chance for him to do it. He's been
I
here
agree.
before.
This is the moment
4
for
years ago,
Biden.
his
This is the
campaign
moment
was
for Trump.
collapsing, and he turned it around in part with a debate and going relentlessly and ruthlessly on the attack. I expect that is what he will try to do tonight.
Okay, John Carl.
Trump
Mary
could take
Bruce
the law and
also in
order
Cleveland
angle when it
covering
comes to the
Biden
race
campaign.
issue.
Joe Biden has been here before as well, not at the top of the
Apologize,
ticket, but
guys.
he
It
has
seems
had
we're out
2
of
vice
sync, but I will
presidential
try and fix it in a
presidential
second.
debates during the general election
We'll
season.
fix this. Simba, what do you see?
George, this is his 27th debate for
Mary
the White
Bruce
House, but
is,
Joe Biden
speaking.
has never
Lady in the
faced
red.
an opponent
Okay, so we're
before
good. We're
like
good now. I
Donald
fixed
Trump.
it.
He says all
Okay.
he has
Okay,
to do to
great.
win here
Lady in
tonight
the pink
is tell the
dress.
truth, but it is not going to be that simple. Joe Biden knows that Donald Trump is going to make this personal. He is going to go on the attack. Joe Biden's goal and his challenge here tonight is to try and rise above that, to not get dragged down into some brawl with the president.
There's
Biden
this,
will fight
meme
back
I
if the
saw
president
online,
misconstrues his record, if
debate
he goes
Actually,
after his
ago.
family.
Do you
But
think
don't
it's
expect
best
Joe
for
to spend
Biden
a lot of
actually
time
to
here
sort of
fact-checking the president?
get into
Instead,
the
he
mud
wants to
with
speak
Trump,
directly to the
or
American people. He wants
stay sort of
tonight
above
to be
the
about
fray?
issues. He's going to hit the president on taxes, on his business
Absolutely
record, and
do
especially
not
in
take the
midst of
high
this
road. I
pandemic,
think the biggest
on
problem with Hillary
healthcare, George.
Clinton.
And we saw Joe
It's funny,
Biden
guys.
release his
Actually, I was
tax
talking.
returns today.
I'm in a
Mary.
class about congressional and presidential elections right now. And we had the
Joe
guy
Biden trying to
who
get ahead,
the
trying to
strategist for
draw
Lincoln
clear
Project come
contrast,
on
trying
today
to set the
and do
tone
a speaker.
for the
He
debate
spoke
to
to the
come.
class,
He did release his
and he
tax
said the best
returns
thing
today
Biden
for
could do is to
last
have
year, drawing a
righteous
sharp
indignation
contrast
and to
with
get
the
angry
president
because
and that
voters like
blockbuster
that.
New
He's a
York Times
Republican
reporting.
against Trump,
Joe
and he
Biden,
makes
we now
the
know
Lincoln
last
Project
year,
is a
paid
advertising group right now run by
$300,000
former
in federal
Bush
income
and
taxes. We still don't
Romney,
know what the
like
president paid because he
staffers
has not
that's trying to get
released his
Republican
tax
voters to vote
returns
for
yet. It is
Biden,
likely to be the
right?
first question
And
here,
he said the
George.
best thing Biden can do is to
Chris
get
Wallace
A,
is on
is
the
to
stage
just
right now. He's outlined
counterpunch
6
and to
topics
not
for the
take the
debate,
high road.
starting out with the
Voters
movement
don't
from
like
the
that.
Trump
Voters don't like
invited
watching them get
democracy,
bullied.
economy,
When
COVID,
Hillary
Supreme
Clinton
Court,
laughs
race
when
and violence,
Trump
election
says something
integrity.
horrible to her, it
Let's go
doesn't
to
make
Chris
her look
Wallace.
better. It makes her look aloof and weird.
She looks arrogant. Yes, I
She looks
agree.
bizarre. It's bizarre. All right, this is Chris Wallace. Let's go.
All right, guys. We are live, guys. We are starting the debate. Chris Wallace is about to speak for us.
Good evening from the Health Education campus of Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the first of the 2020 presidential debates between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers from each candidate to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to these rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. I can assure you, none of the questions has been shared with the commission or the two candidates. This debate is being conducted under health and safety protocols designed by the Cleveland Clinic, which is serving as the health security advisor to the commission for all 4 debates. As a precaution, both campaigns have agreed the candidates will not shake
I am Joe Rogan,
at the
guys.
beginning of tonight's debate. The audience here at the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, no boos or other interruptions, so we, and more importantly,
they're not going to remain silent.
No boos? Oh,
they always say this. They're never going to remain silent. They always
welcome the Republican nominee, President Trump, and the Democratic nominee, Vice President Biden.
All right, guys, they're in. They're in. Oh shit, guys,
they just
Trump.
start clapping.
Trump. Oh boy, Biden looks. They've got him on the sauce, guys. Biden is on the sauce. I repeat, Biden is on the sauce.
How you doing, man?
Gentlemen,
I would take
a lot of people have been waiting
if I was
for
president.
this night, so let's get going. Our first subject is the Supreme Court. President Trump, you nominated Amy Coney Barrett over the weekend to succeed the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You say the Constitution is clear about your obligation and the Senate's to consider a nominee to the court. Vice President Biden, you say that this is an effort by the president and Republicans to jam through an appointment and what you call an abuse of power. My first question to both of you tonight, why are you right in the argument you make and your opponent wrong? And where do you think a Justice Barrett would take the court? President Trump, in this first segment, you go first, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I will tell you very simply, we won the election. Elections have consequences. We have the Senate. We have the White House.
Right about that.
We have a phenomenal nominee, respected by all, top academic, good in every way, In fact, some of her biggest endorsers are very liberal people from Notre Dame and other places. So I think she's going to be fantastic. We have plenty of time. Even if we did it after the election itself. I have a lot of time after the election, as you know. So I think that she will be outstanding. She's going to be as good as anybody that has served on that court. We really feel that. We have a professor at Notre Dame, highly respected by all, said she's the single greatest student he's ever had. He's been a professor for a long time at a great school. And we won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her. And very few people knowingly would say otherwise. And by the way, the Democrats, they wouldn't even think about not doing it. If they had, the only difference is they'd try and do it faster. There's no way they would give it up. They had Merrick Garland, but the problem is they didn't have the election, so they were stopped. And probably that would.
Thank you. Same question to you, Vice President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this and looking forward to this, Mr. President.
Thank you, Joe.
The American people have a right to have a say in who the Supreme Court nominee is. And that say occurs when they vote for a United States senators and when they vote for the President of the United States. They're not going to get that chance now because we're in the middle of an election already. election has already started. Tens of thousands of people have already voted. And so the thing that should happen is we should wait. We should wait and see what the outcome of this election is, because that's the only way the American people get to express their view is by who they elect as president and who they elect as vice president. Now, what's at stake here is the president's made it clear
Exactly.
he wants to get rid of the Affordable
No
Care Act.
minority rule.
He's been running on that, he ran on that, and he's been governing on that. He's in the Supreme Court right now trying to get rid of
If anyone's curious about the
Affordable
text
Care
behind
Act,
them, that's the Declaration of
will
Independence
strip
in America.
20 million people from having insurance, health insurance now, if it goes into court, and the justice and I.
That's a good argument.
I'm not opposed to the justice. She seems
Don't
like a very
focus
fine
on abortion,
person.
focus on
But
healthcare,
she's
yes.
written before she went on the bench, which is her right, that she thinks that the Affordable Care Act is not constitutional. The other thing that's on the court, and if it's struck down, what happens? Women's rights are fundamentally changed. Once again, a woman could be pay more money because she has a pre-existing condition of pregnancy. They were able to charge a woman more for the same exact procedure a man gets. And that ended when we, in fact, passed the Affordable Care Act. And there's 100 million people who have pre-existing conditions, and they'll be taken away as well. Those pre-existing conditions, the insurance companies are going to love this. And so it's just not appropriate to do this before this election. If he wins the election and the Senate is Democrat or Republican, then he goes forward. If not, we should wait until February. All right.
There aren't 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. As far as the say is concerned, the people already had their say. Okay, Justice Ginsburg said very powerfully, very strongly, at some point, 10 years ago or so, she said a president and the Senate is elected for a period of time, but a president's elected for 4 years. We're not elected for 3 years. I'm not elected for 3 years. So we have the Senate, we have a president.
He's elected to the next election.
During that period of time, we have an opening. I'm not elected for 3 years. I'm elected for 4 years. And the 100 million people, Joe, the 100 million people is totally wrong. I don't know where you got that number. The bigger problem that you have is that you're going to extinguish 180 million people with their private health care that they're very happy with.
That's simply not true.
Well, you're certainly going to socialist. You're going to socialist medicine.
We're now into.
I don't know what he's trying to aim at here, like just lowering the number of truth. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know the number, but I don't see what he's trying to get at.
Knows that, what I proposed.
He's trying to frame him as Bernie trying to take away private health insurance.
And we increase it. We do not wipe any. And one
radical
of the
left.
debates we had with 23
wow.
of my colleagues trying
Bastard.
to win the nomination that I won, were saying that Biden wanted to allow people to have private insurance still. They can.
This debate
They
is
do.
surprisingly
They will
civil.
Under my proposal.
Not what you've said.
It just started, man.
That is simply
That's
Party
true.
doesn't say it. Your party
That is
wants to
simple.
go socialist
My
medicine
party is
and
me.
socialist
Right
healthcare.
now, I am
and
the
they're going to
Democratic
dominate
Party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am the Democratic
Here it
Party
comes.
right now. The platform of the
Not according
Democratic
to
Party.
Harris.
Socialist
is what
medicine.
I, in
We'll drink
fact,
to that.
approved of.
Socialist.
What I approved of. Now, here's the deal. The deal is that it's going to wipe out pre-existing conditions. And by the way, the 200,000 people that have died on his watch, how many of those have survived? Well, there's 7 million people that contracted COVID. What does it mean for them going forward if you strike down the Affordable Care Act? And
Joe, you've had
pre-existing
308,000 military people dying because you couldn't provide them proper health care in the military. So don't tell me
I'm
about
happy
this.
to talk about
And if you were here,
Look,
it
here's
wouldn't be
the deal.
200. It would be 2 million people because you were very late on the draw. You
Late
didn't
on
want
the
me to
draw.
ban China, which was heavily infected. You didn't want me to ban
All right, gentlemen,
Europe,
which
which was heavily
Mr. President,
infected. You would have
Mr.
been much
President,
later, Joe.
Mr.
Much
President,
later.
Mr. President.
Oh, he's going straight into Corona? Okay.
You're not gonna be able to
President, as
shut
the
him up.
moderator, we are going to talk about COVID in the next segment, but go ahead.
Let me finish. The point is that the president also is opposed to.
You got to shut him up, Joe. You got to
That's
shut
on
him
the
up,
ballot
buddy.
As well in the court.
It's Chris
In the court.
Wallace. He's like, he's
So
a
that's
dinosaur.
also at stake
Joe is too
right now.
polite.
And so the
He
election
shouldn't
is
be.
already
You don't know it's on the
begun.
ballot. Why is it on the ballot?
Because
Why is it
you
on the
said
ballot? It's not
you're-
on the ballot.
It's on the ballot in the
I
court.
don't think so.
In the court. Well,
There's nothing happening there.
Donald, would
And
you
you
just
don't
be quiet
know
for a minute?
her view on Roe v. Wade. You
I
don't know
don't
her
know.
view.
Well, all right, let's talk. We got a lot to unpack here, gentlemen. We got a lot of time. So, on health care, and then we'll come back to Roe v. Wade.
All right.
Mr. President, the Supreme Court will hear a case a week after the election in which the Trump administration, along with 18 state attorneys general, are seeking to overturn Obamacare, to end Obamacare. You have spent the last...
Because they want to give good health care.
If I may ask my question, sir.
Good health care.
To take away health care from
the
Americans.
last 4 years, you have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you have never in these 4 years come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare.
Of course I have.
Well,
no
I got
alternative.
rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a big
Where is it?
Comprehensive plan.
That is absolutely a big thing. That
lying,
was the worst
dude.
part of Obamacare. Chris,
You're
that was the
debating
worst
him
part.
All right, guys, the BS has started.
I'll ask Joe.
It's just
Individual
funny at
mandate
this
was the
point
most
sometimes.
unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of
He
it.
said he had a health care plan last election
Moderator
cycle.
of this debate.
It's been a whole. It's been a whole.
It's a secret, guys.
And then you can answer
Go
your
ahead.
question. You, in the course of these 4 years, have never come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare. And
They should be able to turn off his
just this
mic.
last Thursday, you signed a largely symbolic executive order to protect people with pre-existing conditions 5 days before this debate. So my question, sir, is what is the Trump health care plan?
Fine. Well, first of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. Let me just tell you something, that there's nothing symbolic. I'm cutting drug prices. I'm going with favored nations, which no president has the courage to do because you're going against big pharma. Drug prices
this is
will
Trump
be
on
coming
friendly
down
turf,
80
guys.
and
This is
90%.
Chris
You
Wallace.
could have done it during your 47-year
So,
period in government, but you didn't do it. Nobody's done it. So we're cutting health care.
about
All of the
pre-existing
things that
conditions?
we've done,
He has not
insulin.
cut health
I'll give you an
Ooh,
example.
shots fired.
Insulin. It was destroying families, destroying people because I'm getting it for so cheap. It's like water, you want to know the truth. So cheap. Take a look at all of
He's
the
letting him
drugs and
dominate.
what we're doing. Prescription drug prices.
Yeah, Joe Biden is being a little bit too
Governors
weak
now
here.
go
He
to
needs to
other
be strong.
countries
He
to
needs to
buy
come out
drugs
strongly. This is
when they
healthcare.
pay
This is
just a tiny
Democrats'
fraction.
number one
This is
issue.
you passed
This
this,
is
dude.
big.
You passed
This is
it.
big
This is
stuff.
your baby.
You'll be happy. I'm about to pick up on one of your points to ask the vice president, which is he points out that you would like to add a public option to Obamacare, and
Yes.
the argument that he makes and other Republicans make is that that is going to end private insurance.
It is
and
not.
well, if I can
sorry.
ask you the question, it will
Not what your
end.
party says, by the way.
It will end private insurance and create a government takeover of health care.
It does not. It's only for those people who are so poor they qualify for Medicaid. They can get that free in most states, except governors who want to deny people who are poor Medicaid. Anyone who qualifies for Medicare would, Medicaid would automatically
This is why Biden was
be
smart not to
enrolled
endorse
in
Medicare
the
for
public
all.
option. The vast
He
majority of the
doesn't get to
American
go
people
against
would
this
still not be in that option. Number one.
Joe, you
Number
agreed
two.
with Bernie
Number-
Sanders, who's
I
far
did-
left, on the manifesto,
Well,
we
you-
call it.
well,
And that
manifesto-
gives you socialized medicine.
Look, hey,
Are you
I'm
saying
not
you
going to
didn't
listen to
agree?
him. The fact of the matter is, I beat
Shut him
Bernie
up.
Sanders.
Not by much.
I agree with Rafael Cruz. Trump is debating the moderator more.
Pocahontas would have left
Well,
2
I
days
tell
early.
you,
You would have lost every primary.
All he knows how to
on
do is
Super
hurt.
Tuesday. You got
Look,
very lucky.
here's the deal.
Pocahontas,
I got very lucky.
okay.
I'm going to get very lucky tonight as
These
well.
guys are telling me, would you
and
shut
tonight
up?
I'm going to make
What?
sure because
With what?
here's the deal. Here's the deal. The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to
Hey,
make
Joe,
sure.
you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has,
You'd be
you know,
surprised.
you pick
You'd be surprised.
the
Go ahead,
wrong
Joe.
guy, the wrong night at the wrong time.
Listen, you agreed with
Here's the
Bernie
deal.
Sanders to the
The
manifesto.
whole idea.
Now
Let
you're
him-
disavowing
He's
it.
doing the whole high road thing. He's got to be like,
Mr.
you let me finish, man.
Just lost the
Joe
you
Biden really
Shut up.
needs to be more forceful, guys.
You just lost
This is
the
the
left.
advantage of having like
You agreed with Bernie Sanders on a plan.
with Hillary Clinton. It made more sense because she had to have that
Absolutely.
image.
What
It
this
was her
clown-
brand. Biden can be
Socialized
rougher with
medicine.
it.
Mr.
Well, I
President.
tell you what, he is not for any help for people needing health care because because he, in fact, already has cost 10 million people their health care that they had from their employers because of his recession. Number one. Number two, there are 20 million people getting health care through Obamacare now that he wants to take it away. He won't ever look you in the eye and say that's what he wants to do. Take it away.
No, I want to give them better health care at a much lower price because
and by
Obamacare
the way, he doesn't know how. He doesn't know how to do that.
I've already fixed it.
He has never offered a plan.
Fixed it to an extent.
He has never done a single thing.
Every time he interrupts, I'll agree.
Gentlemen, you realize if you're both speaking at the same time,
and it's too expensive.
let the president go ahead, sir.
Obamacare is no good. We made it.
This
better.
is very
I had a
quickly
choice to make
devolving
very
into
early.
a
We took away the
shouting
individual
match.
mandate. We guarantee
gotten pretty bad
pre-existing
pretty fast.
conditions, but took away the individual mandate. Listen, this is the way it is. And that destroyed.
My roommates are watching it at the same
They shouldn't
time.
even call it Obamacare. Then I had a choice to make. Do
Tell
I
them
let
to
my
join our
people run
stream.
it really well?
I'll call one of them over to
or
say hi
badly?
at
If
some
I run
point.
it badly,
Maybe when it
they'll
gets
probably
crazy.
blame him, but they'll
Maybe
blame
during the
me.
ads.
More importantly, I want to help people, okay? I said, you got to run it so well.
That's what he's
And I
known
just had a meeting with them. They said, the problem is no matter how well you run Obamacare, it's a disaster. It's too expensive.
I got you.
Premiums
I
are
got
too
it.
high,
That's
and it
what his
doesn't work.
people- that's what his
So
people said.
we do want to get rid of it. Chris, we want to get rid of it.
I
and
understand
give
it, sir,
something
but I have
that's
to
cheaper and
give you
better.
roughly equal time.
Good.
Please let the vice president talk.
Good.
I agree with you,
no
Brian
plan for
Mendes.
healthcare.
Like,
He
the taxes are not going to change
sends-
anything. The
he
debates
sends
won't change
out
anything. The polls will be the
wishful
same
thinking.
after
He
these
has
debates.
executive
This is
orders
good
with no
TV.
power. He hasn't
This is
looked
all
This
it
is pure
at
entertainment.
anybody.
This is
He's
political
controlled
junky
healthcare
stuff.
Since he got elected, he has none. Like almost
I don't
everything
watch
else he
soccer, I
talks
watch
about.
this.
He does not have a plan. He doesn't have a plan. And the fact is, this man doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right,
He's
I have one final question for you,
Sure.
Mr. Vice President.
And a lot of Americans are
If
watching
Senate
this, though.
Republicans, we were talking originally about the Supreme Court here. If Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact, it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your
Court
Democratic
packing.
colleagues in the
You're
Senate
pro
and
court
Congress.
packing.
So my
I
question
am
to
very.
you is, you
Anyone who has a
refuse
question
in the
about
past to
that,
talk
tell
about
your
it.
opinions in the
Are you
comments about
willing to
court packing. I
tell
want
the
to hear
American
them.
people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the
What do you guys think about court
filibuster
packing?
or packing the court?
Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how
you gonna
strongly
pack
you
the
feel.
court?
Vote now.
gonna pack the
Make
court?
sure you, in fact, let people know
He doesn't want
you're a
to answer the
senator.
question.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the
You wanna
question
put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justices,
the
radical
question-
left.
Will you
Who is
shut up,
on,
man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so-
list?
Gentlemen, I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to
unprecedented.
pack the court.
We have,
I'm not going to give a list.
we have ended this segment, and we'll move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it?
They're just
Joe Biden is getting
they're
run
laughing in
over,
the other
guys.
room.
Man. People
Would you shut up, man? I love this,
47
dude.
years you've done nothing. They understand.
All right. The second subject
Keep
is
yapping. Oh, God.
COVID-19, which is an awfully serious subject.
You
so
like that line?
Let's try to be serious about it. We have had
I can
more than
hear their
7
response. It's so
million
fun.
cases of coronavirus in the United States, and more than
Ooh, Chris Wallace is,
200,000 people have died. Even after we produce a vaccine,
Okay,
experts say
talk about
that it
court
could
packing
be
during the break.
months or even
Yes.
years before we come back to anything approaching normal. My question for both of you is, based on what you have said and done so far, and what you have said you would do starting in 2021, why should the American people trust you more than your opponent to deal with this public health crisis going forward? In this case, the question goes to you first, sir. 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Okay, coronavirus. Joe Biden slaughter him.
200,000 dead. As you said, over 7 million infected in the United States. We, in fact, have 5%, 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths. 40,000 people a day are contracting COVID. In addition to that, about between 750 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. He panicked. In addition to that, what did he do? He went in and we were insisting that the Chinese, the people we had on the ground in China should be able to go to Wuhan and determine for themselves how dangerous this was. He did not even ask Xi to do that. He told us what a great job Xi was doing. He said we owe him a debt of gratitude for being so transparent with us. And what did he do then? He then did nothing. He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools. It costs a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
So if we would have listened to you.
You have 2 minutes, sir.
If we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000, and one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it from going in.
Coronavirus was already in the country when Trump closed the borders. It would have been
useless. You don't know how many
useless.
people died in China. You don't know how many people died in Russia. You don't know how many people died in India. They don't exactly give you a straight count, just so you understand. But if you look at what we've done, I closed it, and you said he's xenophobic. He's a racist, and he's xenophobic because you didn't think I should have closed our country. Wait a minute.
It says 2 minutes.
You didn't think we should have closed our country because you thought it was terrible.
He did say
You wouldn't
this.
have closed it for another 2 months.
Yeah, Trump actually is
By
right
doing
on this
it early,
point,
in fact,
guys.
He did
Dr.
say this.
Fauci
That was pretty
said
stupid.
President Trump saved thousands of lives. Many of you Democrat governors said, President Trump did a phenomenal job. We
knew it
worked
earlier.
with the governor. Oh, really? Go take a look. The governors said I did a phenomenal job. Most of them said that. In fact, people that would not be necessarily on my side said that. President Trump did a
Laughing while you
phenomenal
attack you
job.
is not a good
We
look.
did.
I hate
We
the
got
Democrats
gowns,
for
we got
this.
the
I
masks,
hate it when
we
they
made the
laugh, when
ventilators.
people make
You
fun of
wouldn't
them.
have made ventilators.
Just
and now we're
get
weeks away
angry.
from a vaccine. We're doing therapeutics already. Fewer people are dying when they get sick. Far fewer people are dying. We've done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because of the fake news. No matter what you say to them,
He's probably going to announce the vaccines very close as an October surprise.
He will announce it the day before the election.
That's the way it is.
It'll be
Not a
the
day.
October
It's gonna be a
surprise.
week. It's gonna be a
I don't care.
week.
I've gotten used to it. But I'll tell you, Joe, you could never have done the job that we did. You don't have it in your blood. You could have never done that job.
I know how to do the job. I know how to get the job
Well, you didn't do
done.
very well in swine flu. H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000 people died, not 200,000. There was
A
no
very-
economic recession.
Sir, you made a
Far
there was
less
no
lethal
recession.
disease,
You made a
by the way.
point. Let him answer
And
it.
there was we didn't shut down the economy. This is his economy he's shut down. The reason it's shut down is because, look, you folks at home, how many of you got up this morning and had an empty chair at the kitchen table because someone died of COVID? How many of you were in a situation where you lost your mom or dad and you couldn't even speak to them? You had a nurse holding a phone up so you could, in fact, say goodbye.
Right, bring it
Far
personal.
more
That's
people.
good.
Far
That is-
more people.
Good idea there.
And you would have been
And by the way,
months late.
your own
You were months behind me,
his
Joe.
own CDC director says we could lose as many as another
He doesn't look good.
200,000 people between now and the end of the year. And he held up. He said, if we just wear a mask, we can save half those numbers. Just a mask. And by the way, in terms of the whole notion of a vaccine. We're for a vaccine, but I don't trust him at all, nor do you. I know you don't. What we trust is a scientist.
You don't
we
trust
Dr.
Johnson &
Fauci.
Johnson, Pfizer?
And
Okay,
by the way,
gentlemen,
and then-
let me move on to questions about the future because you both have touched on two of the questions I'm going to ask. Focusing on the future first, President Trump, you have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Redfield, said it would be summer before the vaccine would become generally available
Hydroxychloroquine.
to the public.
just-
You said that he was confused and mistaken. Those were your two words.
Yeah.
But Dr. Slaoui, the head of your Operation Warp Speed, has said exactly the same thing. Are they both wrong?
Well, I've spoken to the companies, and we can have it a lot sooner. It's a very political thing because people like this would rather make it political than save lives. It is a very political thing. I've spoken to Pfizer. I've spoken to all of the people that you have to speak to. We have great Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and others. They can go faster than that by a lot. Become very political because the left, or I don't know if I call them left, I don't know what I call them.
the head of your Operation Warp Speed, Dr. Slaoui?
I disagree with him. Yeah, no, I disagree with both of them. And he didn't say that. He said it could be there, but it could also be much sooner. I had him in my office 2 days ago.
He talked about the summer, sir, before it's generally available. Just like
he said it's a possibility that we'll have the answer before November 1st. It could also be after
when it's
that.
generally available.
Well, we're going to deliver it right away. We have the military all set up logistically.
That's
They're
not
all
true.
set up. We have our military. That
before the
delivers
election, very
soldiers,
convenient.
And they can do 200,000 a day. They're going to be
This
delivering
is the
the
same
vaccine.
man
It's
who
all
told
set
you
up.
by Easter this would be gone away. By the warm weather, it'd be gone. Miraculous, like a miracle. And by the way, maybe you could inject some bleach in your arm, and that would take care of it. This is the same
That's a
man.
good line, Joe Biden.
That was
you know that. That was said sarcastically.
And so here's the deal.
Hydroxychloroquine.
I don't like their
Talking about
ties.
vaccine.
I just wanted to say
Every
that.
serious-
I don't
every
like
serious
them.
Company is
Yeah,
talking
Trump's
about
red tie is
maybe
much better.
having a vaccine done.
I don't like either
but
tie.
the
I just
usual
remember, like,
blue
distribution
tie.
of that vaccine
I remember, like,
will not
Romney
occur
and-
sometime beginning or the middle of next year.
and
to get
Obama
it
had really nice
if
ties
we
during
get
the
the
debates.
vaccine. And pray God
Suck.
we will. Pray God we
So
will.
old.
Vice President, I want to pick up
You'll have
on
the
that.
vaccine
I
sooner
want to
than
pick
that.
up on this question, though. You say
About
the
70
public
plus.
can trust the scientists, but they can't trust President Trump. In fact, you said that again tonight. Your running mate, Senator Harris, goes further, saying the public health experts, quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed. Given the fact that polls already show that people are concerned about the vaccine and are reluctant to take it, are you and your running mate, Senator Harris, contributing to that fear?
No more than the question you just asked him. You pointed out. He puts pressure and disagrees with his own scientists.
But you're saying
Everybody
you can't, or
knows.
Senator
And-
Harris is saying you
no,
can't trust the scientists.
No, well, no, you can't trust the scientists. She didn't say that. You can't trust
She said the public health
Did say
experts,
that.
quote, will be muzzled, will be suppressed.
Well,
is that? I can
that's
swear.
what he's going to try to do. But there's millions of scientists, there's thousands of scientists out there, like here at this great hospital, that don't work for him. Their job doesn't depend on him. That's not. They're the people. And by
I
the way,
spoke to the
and Fauci,
scientists that are in charge.
By the way,
they will have the vaccine very soon.
Let him finish.
Do you believe for a moment what he's telling you in light of all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID? He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. He's on record as saying it. He panicked or he just looked at the stock market, one of the two, because guess what? A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets a lot smarter, a lot quicker.
So-
Mr. President?
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use
Joe
that word.
Biden's mental
Because
capacity.
you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years. you've
Counterpunch,
done
man.
nothing.
I want
If
to see
you
an
would've
alpha
had-
male.
Let me just
I
tell you
want to
something,
see a
Joe.
guy with some
If you would've
testosterone.
had the charge of what I was put through. I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country.
How do you let someone talk
And
to you
by
like
the
that?
way, now it's being built again.
see,
and it's
We're going
going
to
up
get to the
fast.
economy in the next segment, sir.
Okay.
It's going up fast. I
Okay.
look forward to talking.
When it comes to how the virus has been handled so far, the two of you have taken very different approaches, and this is going to affect how the virus is handled going forward by whichever of you ends up becoming the next president. I want to quickly go
Make it
through
much harder.
several of those. Reopenings. Vice President Biden, you have been much more reluctant than President Trump about reopening the economy and schools. Why, sir?
Because he doesn't have a plan. If I were running, I know what the plan is. You've got to provide these businesses the ability to have the money to be able to reopen with the PPE as well as with the sanitation they need. You have to provide
that
them
to Nancy
plastic.
Pelosi.
Well, he's just shush for a minute.
Tell it to Nancy
No,
Pelosi and Schumer,
by the
Brian
way,
Chuck.
Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, they have a plan. He won't even meet with them. The Republicans won't meet with him in the Senate. And he sits in his golf course. And, well, I mean, literally, think about it.
You probably play more than I do, Joe.
What about this question of reopenings and the fact?
Well, he wants to shut down this country, and I want to keep it open. And we did a great thing by shutting
This is not going too well for Joe
Let me
Biden.
shut you down for a
Biden
second,
is
Joe,
too
just for
soft.
1 second.
This is why you need a
Biden is
younger
too soft.
candidate. You need a younger
He wants to
candidate.
shut down the
This is
country.
what I'm
He
saying.
just went through it.
Literally anyone else would have been better.
Anyone else. Kamala Harris would have been better. Like, just like
You
shut
would have
him
been
down.
better, RJ. We could have put you in there.
We could have like
Very, very
just
vulnerable. We
someone who can
learned
like
a lot.
make
Young
him look
children
stupid or weak.
Even younger
Biden
people
looks
aren't.
soft.
We've learned a lot. But he wants to shut it down.
Biden looks
More
like he's
people
fading,
will be hurt
essentially.
by continuing. If you look at Pennsylvania, if you look at certain states that
We
have
need
been
someone to
shut
channel
down,
the
they have
anger
Democrat
of the
governors
country.
all. One of the reasons they're shut down is because they want to keep it shut down
We need
until
an
after
avatar
the
of it.
election on November
I want to
3rd.
move on to another
because
subject.
it's a
I want to move
political
on to
thing.
another
I've gotta
subject.
respond.
But those states,
Gentlemen, I
those
want to move
states
on to
are
another
not
subject.
doing well that are shut down
Which is
right
gotta
now.
respond to that.
President
shut
Trump,
down the
you
whole
have
country.
begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you have cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
No, I
the
think masks
efficacy
are
of
okay. You have
masks?
to understand, if you look, I mean, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on, when I think I need it. Tonight, as an example, everybody's had a test, and you've
think
had
masks
Ooh, he pulls one out of his pocket.
distancing and
Smart.
all of the things that you have to. But I
Just
wear
like your
masks
rally.
when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. I will say.
Welcome, Bombs in Yemen, one of our Patreons.
The way to open businesses
live.
is give them the wherewithal to be able
What do you think's going? How do you think it's
We
going?
provided money.
honestly
the
hilarious.
I was asking
You think it's hilarious? Mabe, what do you
Mask
tell the world what do you think?
own
What do you
head of
think
CDC
about the
said if
debate?
you
Who's
just
doing
wore a
better?
mask between now, if everybody wore a mask in social
I
distancing
think Biden looks
between
pretty
now and
weak.
January,
They
we'd
both
probably save
Biden
up
is
to
really
100.
failing.
They're both
This
old.
is honestly just
It matters.
And they've also
It
said
is,
the opposite.
right?
They've also said,
why do I have to
serious
choose
person
between
said the
these
opposite.
two?
Listen to the American public, guys.
Dr. Fauci
All
said
right.
the
He did
opposite.
not
Come back in a
say
little
We
bit.
got a
Said
little
very
bit more than a
strongly.
minute left in this
Masks
segment.
are
lighter?
not good. Then he
Okay, it's
changed
right
his
there,
mind.
so.
He said masks good.
I
I'm
wanna
okay
ask-
with masks.
I
I'm
want to
not
ask you
fighting
both about
masks.
one last subject because
No, I
your
agree with
different
Red
approaches
West.
even
Red West
affected the
saying,
way
imagine
that
how
you
much
have
better Bernie would have been
campaigned.
debating Trump.
President Trump,
Biden
you're
is
holding
flailing, and it's a bit
large rallies
sad.
with
That's
crowds
definitely
packed
true.
together,
Sanders
thousands
at
of
least,
people.
can make the
Outside,
argument.
yes, sir.
I mean,
Agreed.
Biden
Vice
is getting
President
run over.
Biden, you are holding much
Suddenly Jack
smaller,
says, do you think a person like Teddy
events
Roosevelt stacked
with
against
nobody
Trump?
will show
Oh my
up.
God,
People
Teddy
with
Roosevelt. I would do anything
true.
for him to
Nobody
just
shows
come
up
out of the
to it.
grave.
All right.
The
In
grave.
any
I'd
case,
do anything
why
for him
you
to come
holding
back.
the big
I'll
rallies?
show you
Why
something.
you not? You go first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
But are you
I've
not
done a
worried
great
about it
job
spreading
as a
disease?
president, and I'll have 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
how much I want Teddy
We
Roosevelt
have
back.
a lot of
This is
people.
how much I want him
well,
back.
so far, we have had no
Nothing's been
problem
sane
whatsoever.
since.
It's outside. That's a big difference, according to the experts. And we do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, as you see. I mean, and literally on 24 hours notice. And Joe does the circles and has 3 people someplace.
Okay.
By the way, did you see one of the last big rallies he had? And a reporter came up to him to ask him a question. He said, no, stand back. Put on your mask. Put on a mask. Have you been tested? I'm way far away from those other people. That's what he said. I can't. I'm going to be okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing in one another.
We've had no negative
cheek to
effect.
jowl. No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect, and we've had 35,000, 40,000
All right. Do you
people
want
at these rallies.
Just
Yes.
quickly finish up because I want to move on to our next.
Yes, I would. He's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraged them not to.
All right.
That's
He's a
fair.
fool.
Last
If
rast.
you could
That's
get
fair.
the crowds, you would have done the same thing. But you
suppose.
can't.
Maybe I'm
Nobody
just
can.
a
Gentlemen, can we move
angry
on to
young
the-
man.
Gentlemen, can we move on to the economy?
Yes.
The economy is, I think it's fair to say, recovering faster than expected
We all
from the
project.
shutdown.
Much faster.
In the second quarter, the unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month. The Federal Reserve says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that
It's a little bit
mean
too late for a V-shaped
to
recovery.
the American people in terms of the economy? President Trump, in this
Good.
segment, you go first.
So we built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. When the plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of
plague.
still
China
240,000 people is too much.
bad, but it's
One
not that
person is
bad.
too much. Should have never happened from
I
China.
like it.
But what happened is we closed it down, and now we're reopening, and we're doing record business. We had 10.4 million people in a 4-month period that we've put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You know, a lot of people, between drugs and alcohol and depression, when you start shutting it down, you take a look at what's happening in some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to
I'm on a
open it.
Facebook
One of them
group, and I'm
came out
seeing how
last
they're
week. You saw
responding
that.
live to
we're going
this.
to open up on November 9th.
He's
Why
attacking the
November 9th?
Democrat-run
Because it's
states
after the
now.
election. They
He's been
should
doing
be
that his whole
hurting us
presidency. That's the
by
stupidest
keeping
thing in the
it
world.
closed. They're
I
hurting
hate that,
people.
actually.
People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash
people
their hands.
buy
they
it
can
hook,
wear
line, and
masks.
sinker.
They can do whatever they want. But they got to open these states up. When you look at North Carolina, when you look at these governors are under siege, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others, you got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce. Look at what's going on with alcoholism and drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly well, setting records as it does it. We don't need somebody to come in and say, let's shut it down.
All right, your 2 minutes, sir. We're now moved to you. As I said, posing the question, the president says it's a V-shaped recovery. You say it's
Saw
a
a comment says this debate serves as
recovery.
evidence
What's
that we
the
need a
difference?
maximum
The difference
age limit
is
for presidential
millionaires
candidates, and I
billionaires
think
like
that's
him in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very
That
well.
is true, guys. No septuagenarians.
Billionaires have made another $300 billion.
this is just upsetting.
Because
We need people
of
with
his
moxie.
profligate tax proposal, and he only focused
Come on,
on
guys,
the
bring in
market.
like
But you folks at home,
Buttigieg or something.
you folks
And this
living
this
in
girl just
Cleveland
commented on our
and all those
live
small
thread in the
towns
Facebook
and
group. Can
working-class
Biden
towns
be
in
a
America.
fucking man?
How well are you doing? This guy paid
Yep.
a total of $750
We all want a
in
man.
taxes.
Sir, wait, no,
And also-
sir, it's his
Mr. Wrong
Hold on,
I
hold on.
understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
Do I get my time back?
Okay, he's getting into the
fact
tax
is that
returns.
He has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying, people who've been putting themselves in the way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no intention of doing anything about making it better for you all at home in terms of your health and your safety. Schools. Why aren't schools open? Because it costs a lot of money to open them safely. You know, they were going to give, his administration was going to give the teachers and school students masks. And then they decided, no, couldn't do that because it's not a national emergency. Not a national emergency. They've done nothing to help small businesses. Nothing. They're closing. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open
Okay,
safely.
now Biden is
Time
making a
up,
good
sir.
argument.
We are going to get to the.
Yeah,
we're
this is
gonna-
good.
Respond to that.
Well, you both had 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools.
Stimulants are kicking in.
People want their schools open. They don't want
Yeah,
them
the
shut
stimulants
down.
are kicking
They don't
in
want their
indeed.
state shut
Perfect.
down.
The source
They
is
want
now
their
working.
I look at
Exactly.
New York. It's so sad what's happening in New York. It's almost like a ghost town, and I'm not sure it can ever recover what they've done in New York. People want their places open. They want to get back to their lives.
People
They'll
want
be
to be
careful,
safe.
but they want their schools open.
People want
I'm
to
the
be
one that
safe.
brought back football.
Everyone.
By the way, I brought back Big Ten football It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And
All right,
people of Ohio are very proud of me. And you know
We're
how
going
I
to get
found
back.
out? When it took a
Gentlemen,
phony
we're going to
ad.
get to your economic plans going forward in
Trump
a
looks pretty
moment.
bad
But
here.
first, Mr. President, as you well know, there's a new report that in 2016, the year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income tax each of those years. I know that you pay a lot of other taxes, but I'm asking you the specific question. Is it true that you paid $750
See Gusta
in
Fass and
federal income taxes?
Biden kind of won fair
each
and
of those
square. I
2
would say
years?
that. I didn't like him, but
Millions
he
of
did win
dollars
the
in
primary.
taxes,
Like
millions of dollars of
fair and
income
square.
tax.
By
And let me just
good
tell you,
margins.
there was a story in one of the papers. I
Show us
paid,
your
For all
tax.
the
I
wrong
paid
reasons,
$38
though,
million
unfortunately.
For all the
one
wrong
year.
reasons, but he did
I
win fair
paid
and square.
$27 million.
Show us your tax
one year.
returns.
I went. You'll see it as soon as it's finished. You'll see it. You know, if you want to do, go to the Board of Elections. There's a 118-page or so report that says everything I have, every bank I have, I'm totally under-leveraged because the assets are extremely good. And we have a very, I built
Sir,
a great
I'm asking
company.
you a specific question, which
But
is...
let me tell you.
I understand all of that.
Release your
I
tax
understand all of that.
return.
No, Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you
Trump is
tell us
obfuscating.
how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see
When?
it.
Chris Wallace
But let me
is
just
more
tell
than
you, Chris, let me just tell you something that. it
Chris
was the
Wallace is
tax
doing more
laws. I don't wanna
debating
pay
than Joe
tax, but
Biden.
Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is. He passed a tax bill that gave us all these privileges
That's a funny way
for
to put it.
depreciation and for tax credits. We build a building and we get tax credits, like the hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. You get a massive.
Yes, he's
which, by the
passing
way,
it on
Exactly
to
what we
Biden.
said.
given to me
Exactly what we said.
by the
Exactly what we
Obama
said.
administration, if you can believe that.
Trump will
Now,
say he's
they
merely
fired
exploiting the
him
system
right
that
after
Biden created.
That's a good argument. It's not a bad
I
argument.
do want to respond. Look,
His supporters
the
will
tax
buy it.
code that made him, put him in a position that he pays less tax than a school teacher makes, on the money a school teacher makes, is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does
He's
take
not lying,
advantage
though,
of the tax code.
about
why
that. It was
I'm
the
gonna
tax
eliminate
code.
the Trump tax
Okay.
codes. And we're going to
I feel like that was
eliminate
fair.
those tax cuts and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact,
Wait,
need
come here.
help. People
I'm
out
gonna
there
pee. How about you
need
sit?
help.
But why
where I
didn't you
am?
do it over the last
No,
25 years?
Just
Why
come
didn't
to
you
the
do it
place.
over
You weren't president screwing things up.
You were a senator, and
You're
by
the
way,
worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just tell you, Joe. I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47
Okay, now
years,
Biden's
Joe.
starting to get a
We've
bit
done
angry.
things that you never even thought of doing,
Okay,
including
gentlemen.
fixing the broken military that you gave me, including taking care
we're
of your
talking,
vets.
Mr. President, we're talking about the economy. I'd like to ask you about your plans going forward because, Mr. Vice President, your economic plan, if you were to be elected president, focuses a lot on big government, big taxes, big spending. I want
I have
to
to
focus
pee,
first
guys. I'll
on
be
the
right back.
taxes. You propose
right,
more
run.
than $4 trillion over a decade in new taxes on individuals making more than $400,000 a year and on corporations. President Trump says that that kind of an increase in taxes is going to hurt the economy as it's just coming out of a recession.
Well, just take a look at what as the analysis done by Wall Street firms points out that my economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years, number one. And number two, it would create an additional $1 trillion in economic growth because it would be about buying American. That we're going to make the federal government spend $600 billion a year on everything from ships to steel to buildings and the like. And under my proposal, we're going to make sure that every
right.
penny of that has to be made.
Biden is
by
making the
a
protectionist
company.
argument.
Respectfully, sir, I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
Incorporating
By
Trump's
the way,
own
I'm going to
rhetoric.
eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the corporate tax 28%. It shouldn't be 21%. You have 91 companies, in the Fortune 500 who don't pay a single penny in tax, making billions of dollars.
Why didn't you do it
Billions
before
of
when you were vice president with Obama?
Because you, in fact, passed that. That was
Right.
your
I
tax proposal.
I got it done. And you know what happened?
you got it.
Our economy boomed like it's never
The
boomed.
economy
Well,
is
Mr.
busted.
President,
Let me finish.
Mr. President, let me pick up on that. You would continue your free market approach, lower taxes, more deregulation, correct?
Not lower taxes for the American people.
But let me.
Excuse me.
But in Obama's, you talk about the economy booming. It turns out that in Obama's final 3 years as president, more jobs were created, 1.5 million more jobs than in the first 3 years of your presidency.
They had the slowest recovery since economic recovery since 1929. It was the slowest recovery. Also, they took over something that was down here. All you had to do is turn on the lights and you pick up a lot. But they had the
I mean, that's
slowest
technically
economic
true, but it was the
recovery
worst
since
recession since
1929
1929 as
Let me talk about
well.
the stock market. When the
Yeah.
stock market goes up, that means jobs. It also means 401ks. If you got in, if you ever became president with your ideas, you want to terminate my
No,
taxes?
it does not.
My taxes, I'll tell you what, you'll lose half of the companies that have poured in here will leave, and plenty
Half
of
of the
companies that are
companies,
already here, they'll leave for
hardly any
other
companies
places.
have
They will
poured in
leave,
here.
and you will have a
Have it-
depression, the likes of which you've never seen.
Look,
Mr.
we
Vice President.
inherited the worst recession short of a depression in American history. I was asked to bring it back. We were able to have an economic recovery that created the jobs you're talking about. We handed him a booming economy. He blew it.
It wasn't
he blew
booming.
It. He blew it.
It wasn't booming. It was the weakest recovery
Well, sir, is it
since
fair to, wait, is it fair to,
1929.
is it fair to say he blew it when, in
When
fact, it was,
COVID came.
It was.
record low unemployment
Yeah.
before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing
Trump merely
went low.
benefited from the economic
Manufacturing
conditions
went
of the
whole.
previous
Number
president.
Excuse me,
one.
Chris, wait.
Number two.
Chris,
Number three.
They said it would take. No, you're on number two.
No.
Chris.
More
Chris,
jobs were outsourced
they
under
said
Trump than
it
under
would take
Obama.
a miracle to bring back manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing.
We
Part
did
of my
not agree.
standard fare.
I'm the guy
He
that brought
totally
back the
gave up on
automobile industry.
manufacturing.
All right, let him.
We brought back, I was asked to bring back Chrysler and General Motors. We brought them back right here in the state of Ohio and Michigan. He blew it. They're gone. He blew it. And in fact, they're going.
Ohio had the best year it's ever had last year. Michigan had the best year they've ever had.
That is not
Many
true.
car companies
No,
came in from Germany, from Japan, went to Michigan, went to Ohio.
They're not having
And they didn't come in with you.
Mr. Vice President, go ahead.
And so you take a look at what he's actually done. He's done very little. His trade deals are the same way. He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit
China
with
ate
Mexico.
your lunch.
Exactly.
They
All right,
ate
gentlemen,
10%. China ate your lunch, Joe, and no
but-
wonder your son goes
More
in,
jobs
he takes
outsourced
out-
under Trump than under
Well,
Obama.
He takes out billions of dollars.
Remember
takes
that,
out
guys.
billions of dollars to manage. He makes millions of dollars. And also,
Simply
while
not
we're at it,
true.
why is it, just out of curiosity, the mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million.
is
What
not
did he
true.
do to deserve it?
That
What
is
did he do with Burisma?
none of
to
the-
Don't
deserve
talk about my son that way, you
$180,000?
fucking idiot.
That-
That's what you should
Question
say.
and answer. If
None of that is true.
Don't talk about my son that way.
Now
Mr. President,
Biden should get
Mr.
angry.
President, please.
Totally
ask a question.
discredited. Totally discredited. And by the way,
Well, wait,
let's
he didn't
talk-
get $3.5 million, Joe?
Mr. Vice
He got
Mr.
$3.5
President,
million.
it is not true.
Oh,
Here's-
really?
Mr.
Oh.
President,
But, Mr.
it's an open discussion, please.
Now,
It's a fact.
Well,
There's-
you have
Joe
raised
Biden
an
looks
issue. Let
extremely
Mr.
weak,
Vice President
extremely
answer.
inept here.
Discredited.
Did
There was a
Burisma pay him
report.
$183,000 a month
With
no experience in energy?
Mr.
Look,
President,
no
my
job.
son did nothing wrong at Burisma.
I think he did.
and
Mr.
the only
President,
guy that
let
did
him
something-
answer.
He doesn't want to let me answer because he knows I have the truth. His position has been totally, thoroughly discredited.
who?
And
The media?
By everybody. Well, by the
By the
media,
media,
by our
because they refuse to
allies,
talk
by the
about it
World
because they're
Bank,
embarrassed.
by everyone has discredited. Matter of fact, even the people
President,
who
please stop.
testified under oath.
So let me
under
ask you
oath,
this,
and-
Joe.
and-
He's
No,
not-
Go ahead, Mr.
This is
Listen
so
to you.
weak.
People under.
You got
Joe
Pathetic.
Biden is
$3.5
flailing.
Moscow.
He's
He
flailing.
testified under oath
Pathetic
that his
guy.
administration said.
Anyone could
"I
make
did
a better
my
argument
job
than
and I
Joe
did
Anyone
my
would
job."
have to be angrier if you attacked their son.
Well, I'll give you the list of the
fire
people who
them.
testified.
No, go ahead, sir.
Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a
Some
good
because
job.
some people don't do a
well,
good
here's
job.
The,
With you,
Go
they
ahead.
said
You
that-
got the, wait a minute.
This
you
is
get
for
the
all the
final
people
word.
who thought
it's
that
hard to
Joe
get anywhere
Biden
with
was
this clown. Excuse me, this-
electable.
Hey, let me just say, Joe.
No. Mr. President.
$3.5
Mr.
million,
President.
Joe.
That is simply
Why did
not
he
true.
deserve
Where are those
$3.5
South
million from
Carolinians
Moscow?
now?
Here's the
Yeah,
deal.
right.
We want to
What'd
talk
you all
about
do?
families. And
He's still
ethics.
gonna win, probably.
I don't want to do
but-
that.
I don't know
his
about that,
family
man.
We could talk about all night. His family's
My
already.
family,
No, let him go.
my
Let him
family
already
lost
wrote.
a fortune by coming down and helping
Go
us
ahead.
with
Go ahead,
government.
sir.
And that's such a.
they're right
that's
here.
Mr.
That's such
President.
a
Every
great.
single one of them lost
This
a
is not
fortune
about
by
my
coming and
family or
helping
his
us with
family. It's
government.
about your family,
They
the
didn't put
American
$3.5
people.
million
He
for
doesn't.
nothing.
That's not true. It doesn't.
Trump has
want to
systematically
talk about
profited from his
what
position
you
in
need.
government.
You, the American people.
Nepotism,
It's about you.
funneling money to
That's
his
what we're
hotels
talking
from
about.
foreign
All right,
dignitaries.
That's the end of the segment. We're moving on.
He didn't take them.
Well,
Vice
it's a very-
President,
but Chris,
no,
can I be honest? It's a very important
Try to be
question.
honest.
He stood up.
No,
he stood up,
the answer to
and
the
he
question is no.
threatened Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion,
Sir,
if you
that
get rid of
is
the trust.
You know what?
absolutely not
Stop.
true.
Tape doing it.
You're going to
On
have
tape.
True.
Gentlemen.
Is-
I hate to raise
Chris,
my voice,
he's
but
on
it seems
tape.
to be. Why shouldn't I be different than the two of
He's
you?
even talking about Chris
here's the bigger
Wallace.
point.
We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment. We're going to go to the next segment. In that segment,
He's
you
yelling
each
at the
have 2
presidential
uninterrupted
candidates?
moments.
It's crazy.
In those 2 interrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can.
I
say
live in
anything
clown
you
country,
want.
bro. I don't
I'm
live
going
in
to
a
ask a
country.
question about race, but if you
The
want to
debates
answer
in my
about something
country
else,
are a
go
lot
ahead.
more civil,
But
although it's getting
I think
worse,
that
to be
the
quite
country would be
honest.
better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer
should
interruptions.
just buy
I'm
guns and
appealing
shoot
to you,
each
sir, to
other.
do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
Well, that's
than
all
he
right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
there's
than.
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fine people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yeah, sure.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the two of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden, you go first.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the
Biden needs to
Constitution.
do better in this.
And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from it like he has done. It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people look like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, just spewing anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. A young woman got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that.
It is whose
Now,
2
second,
minutes, sir.
second point I'd make to you is that when Floyd was killed, when Mr. Floyd was killed, there was a peaceful protest in front of the White House. What did he do? He came out of his bunker, had the military use tear gas on him so he could walk across to a church and hold up a Bible. And then what happened after that? The bishop of that very church said that it was a disgrace. The general who was with him said all he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred,
Make the
racist
argument.
division. This is a man who, in fact, you talk about helping African Americans. 1 in 1,000 African Americans has been killed because of the coronavirus. And if he doesn't do something quickly, by the end of the year, 1 in 500 will have been killed. 1 in 500 African Americans. This man,
Really?
is a savior of African Americans.
Oh my
this
God.
man cares at all. This man's done virtually nothing. Look, the fact
did not
is
even
that
know
you
that.
have to
That's a
look
lot.
at what he talks about. You have
that's
to
a hell
look
of a
at
lot.
what he did.
That's
And what he
horrible.
did has been disastrous for the African American community.
That's your
So-
system.
President Trump,
I'm
you have 2
sorry. I
minutes.
don't know
Why
what to say.
should
It's still
Americans
so
trust
terrible.
you over your opponent to deal with
He
racism?
did a crime bill, 1994, where you call them super predators, African Americans, the super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, Joe.
No, no, sir. It's his 2 minutes.
So you did that, and
Wasn't
they
that
call you
Hillary
super
Clinton?
predator, and I'm letting people out of jail now that you have treated the African American population community, you have treated the black community about as bad as anybody in this country. You did the 1990, and that's why, if you look at the polls, I'm doing better than any Republican has done in a long time, because they saw what you did. You call them super predators, and you've
Well, this is
called them
true.
worse than that. Because you look
It's
back
marginal.
at your
It's
testimony
very
over these,
marginal.
you've called them a lot worse than that. As far as the church is concerned, and as far as the generals are concerned, we just got the support of 250 military leaders and generals.
No more than
Total
10%.
support. Law enforcement, almost every law enforcement group in the United States. I have Florida, I have Texas, I have Ohio, I have Portland, the sheriff.
The law
just came out
enforcement is the
today.
problem,
He
my
support
friend.
The police
President
unions.
Trump.
That's
The
I don't
police
think you have
unions
any
are the
law
problem.
enforcement. You can't even say the
They
word
prevent
law enforcement,
police
because if you say
accountability.
those
I discussed
words,
this in my
You're
video.
going to lose all of your radical left supporters. And why aren't you saying those words, Joe? Why don't you say the words law enforcement? Because you know what? If they called us in Portland, we would put out that
Got a
fire
drink to
in
that?
half an hour. But
Back
they
up.
won't do it because they're run by radical left Democrats. If you look at Chicago, if you look at any place you want to look, Seattle, they heard we were coming in the following day, and they put up their hands.
The
and we got
violence is
back
happening
Seattle.
under Trump's watch.
Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because
Yeah.
we believe in law and order, but you don't. The top 10 cities and just about
Trump's
the top
rhetoric has
40
made it
cities
worse,
are
not
run
better.
by Democrats and in many cases radical left, and they've got you wrapped around their finger, Joe, to a point
This
where
is
you
so
don't want
wild.
to say
Where am
anything
I?
about law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of
This
this
is
country
incorrect.
want and demand.
Both the violent and
you're
peaceful
afraid to even
cities
say
are
it.
run by Democrats. All
I
cities
wanna-
are run
I
by
wanna return to
Democrats.
the
This is not an
question of
argument.
race. Vice President Biden, after the grand jury in the Breonna
You're right.
Taylor case decided not to charge any of the police with homicide, you said it raises the question, quote, whether justice could be equally applied in America. Do you believe that there is a separate but unequal system of justice for blacks in this country?
Yes, there is. There's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. They have to be held accountable. They have to be held
Oh, God,
accountable.
the bad apples
And what I'm
argument is
gonna do as
inaccurate.
President of
This
the
is
United
a
States
systemic
call
problem.
Yeah, but it's
together
good politics.
An entire group of people at the White House.
Can't be on
everything
TV
from the
calling
civil
cops
rights groups
bastards.
to the
That's
police
not what you
officers,
do.
the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out. We're going to work this out so we change the way in which we have more transparency in when these things happen. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to George Floyd. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to Breonna Taylor. Most don't like it. But we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate. Never appropriate. Peaceful protest is. Violence is never appropriate.
All right, Ms.
What is peaceful
President-
protest? When they run through the middle of the
President-
town
President Trump-
and burn down your
President Trump,
stores and kill people all
President
over
Trump,
the place,
that
and you
is
say
not
peaceful
peaceful.
protest?
President Trump,
No, it's
I'm not
not.
asking-
95% of the protests are
Continue to
peaceful. This has been
raise the
studied
promise. We're gonna
empirically.
get to the issue of law and
95% of the
order in a
protests
moment.
of George Floyd have been
This
peaceful.
month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did
The
you
Hillary
decide
Clinton-Trump
to do that, to
debates were
end
better
racial
TV. I'll
sensitivity
say that.
training? And
Yeah, this is a lot
do
less
you believe
entertaining, I
that
will
there is
admit.
This is just
systemic
upsetting,
racism in
if
this
anything,
country,
because
sir?
Trump isn't
I
a
ended it
challenger.
because it's
Trump is
racist.
just
I
a really
ended it
scary
because
president.
A lot of people
And
were
Biden's a
complaining that they were
challenger
asked to
who's
do
winning
things
by
that
a
were
lot, who's
absolutely
still doing
insane,
poor.
that it was a radical
Biden is by default.
revolution
He's
that was
just
taking
Democrat.
place in
That's
our
it. It's a
military,
Z- it's a D.
in our schools, all over the place, and you know it, and so does everybody
what
else.
is radical,
and he would know.
What is
Oh, it was
radical
totally
about
racist.
racial sensitivity training? sir?
If you were a certain person, you had no status in life. It was sort of a reversal.
You know
And
it.
if you look at the
Everyone
people,
knows
we would
it.
pay people hundreds of thousands of dollars to teach.
It's true that
very
sensitivity
bad
training
ideas
is
and
not very
frankly,
effective.
sick
Implicit
ideas
bias training is
and
not
really
effective.
Diversity
Everyone
training, in
does it.
fact, sometimes has a negative
Country.
effect
And
because
I'm
it
not
makes
gonna do
people more
that. I'm not
defensive.
gonna allow that to
Actually, they
happen.
might have. It probably
We
should
have
have
to go
gotten rid of it
back
anyways.
to the
but,
core values of this country.
Yeah.
They were teaching people.
He's right. I
that
agree
our
with Trump
country
here.
is a
I actually do
horrible
agree with
place,
Trump
It's
here.
a racist place, and
But
they
for
were
different
teaching
reasons.
people to hate our country.
I don't know.
And I'm not gonna
I
allow
just
that to
don't think
happen.
anything of those
President
things are
Biden.
useful.
Nobody's doing that. He's the
you-
racist.
you just don't know.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about
You
this
don't
than he
know.
does.
Let him finish.
The fact is that there is racial insensitivity.
Rafael
People
Cruz
have
is
to be
right.
made aware
Chris
Call him
Wallace has
racist?
won the
other
debate.
people feel
They
like
called him racist,
what,
yes.
Crazy.
what insults them, what is demeaning to them. It's important to people know they don't want to. Many people
It's a
don't
losing
want to
argument,
hurt
Biden.
other people's feelings, but it makes a big difference. It makes a gigantic difference in the way a child is able to grow up and have a sense of self-esteem. It's a little bit like how this guy and his friends look down on so many people. They look down their nose on people like Irish Catholics like me and grew up in Scranton. They look down on people who don't have money. They look down on people who are of a different faith. They look down on people who are a different color. In fact, we're all Americans. The only way
Working
we're
class
bring this
hero,
country
let's go.
together is bring everybody together. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together. We can take this on and we can defeat racism in America.
President Trump, sir.
During the Obama-Biden administration, there was tremendous division. There was hatred. You look at Ferguson, you look at
racism.
you
That's a
go
tall
to
order, my friend.
many places. Look at Oakland. Look what happened in Oakland. Look what happened in Baltimore. Look what happened. Frankly, it was more violent than what I'm even seeing now.
Oh, my
but the
Lord.
reason
This
is that
ridiculous.
the Democrats that run these
Absolutely
cities
ridiculous.
don't want to talk like you about law and order.
Violent
and you
crime,
still haven't mentioned.
violent
Are you in
crime.
favor of law and order?
I'm in favor of law. You follow
Are you in favor of law and order? Go
Yes, I'm in
ahead.
favor.
You asked a question, let him finish.
Law and order.
loses left.
Law and
Let
order.
him- let him answer.
Law and order with justice, where people get treated fairly. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime went down 17%, 15% in our administration.
All right.
It's gone up on his watch.
Went down much more in ours.
All right, we're
He
now.
is
You're,
president of
Mr.
the
President, you're going
United
to
States of America.
We
Mr.
were
President,
breaking every
you're-
record in the
Mr.
book.
President, you're going to be very happy because
And
we're now going to
excuse
talk
me,
about law and order.
Places we had trouble were Democratic-run cities.
That's
and
exactly
those
my question.
Democratic-
There has been a dramatic increase in homicides in America this summer particularly, and you often blame that on Democratic mayors and Democratic governors, but in fact there have been equivalent
Trump's watch.
spikes in Republican-led cities like Tulsa and Fort Worth. So the question is this really a party issue?
I think it's a party issue. You can bring in a couple of examples, but if you look at Chicago, what's going on in Chicago, where 53 people were shot and 8 died shot. If you look at New York, where it's
Race
going
baiting.
up like nobody's ever seen anything, the numbers are going up 100, 150, 200% crime.
Republican
It is
cities.
crazy what's going on, and he doesn't want to say.
You know,
law and
the
order
novelty
because he
of
can't,
Trump,
because
I'll
he'll lose
admit
his
that
radical
even-
left supporters,
though I
and
never
once he
liked him,
does that, it's over.
there was an
But
entertaining
if
aspect
he ever
to him.
got to run this country,
He's
and
it's
they
just
ran
worn
it the
off.
way
He's
he
just
would wanna
tiring.
run it,
This
we
guy's
would
gotten
have-
exhausted.
Our suburbs would
He's
be
not
gone.
fun anymore.
By the
Pe-
way, our
people are
suburbs would be
people are
gone,
exhausted now.
and you
with
would see
the Trump
problems like you've
He
presidency.
never
would
seen.
know a suburb.
He used to
unless
be very
took a
entertaining.
wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
Sometimes he still is.
Go ahead, wait a minute.
No,
I was
it's just
raised in the
too much
suburbs.
now.
This is not 1950. All these dog whistles on racism don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. There's
He's
many
a funny
people today
substitute
driving
teacher
their
who
kids to
overstayed his
soccer
welcome.
practice and or to black and white and Hispanic in the same car as there have been any time in the past. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment. They're being flooded. They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
I do want to talk
In
about
the context,
this issue
Trump
of
is
law and
losing
order,
the
though,
suburbs
and in
very
the joint
handily.
recommendation
Trump's appeal to
that came
suburbs
from
is
the
not working.
Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing. First of all, what does reimagining policing mean, and do you support?
It means
let me, if I might finish the question. What does reimagining policing mean, and do you support
Tread
the
very
Black
carefully,
Lives
Biden.
Matter call for community control of policing?
Look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police offices. As a matter of fact, local police, the only one defunding in his budget calls for a $400 million cut in
Yeah.
local law enforcement assistance. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 9/11 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities. That's when crime went down. It didn't go up, it went down. And so we have to be engaged.
That's not what
in
they're
prevent-
talking about, Chris. That's
well,
not what
that-
they're
that's
He's talking about
exactly-
defunding the police.
That is not true.
He doesn't have any law
Would you
support.
look?
He has no law enforcement
That's not
support.
true.
Almost
That's
nothing.
not. Look.
Oh, really? Who do you have? Name one group
Biden's
that
never said
supports
anything
you.
like
Name
that.
one group that came
Biden
out
has
and supported you.
that's the
Never
thing, Biden has
even, like,
never supported
remotely.
defunding the police.
We don't have time to do
No,
anything.
think
All
about
right.
it.
Buddy, like if he said that, that'd be
Law
ecstatic.
enforcement group that came out and
I think,
supported
gentlemen,
you.
I think I'm going to take back the
There aren't.
moderator's
I don't think
role.
there
and
That was a
I'm
weird
gonna
thing with
get
Biden. Like
to another
he's either like a
subject, which is the
Republican
issue of
light or he's a
protests
radical
in many
leftist
cities
or he's anything
have
that
turned
people don't want him
violent.
to be.
In Portland, Oregon, especially, we had more than 100 straight days of
And
protests.
it's both tough on crime
which
and
I
soft
think
on
you would
crime.
agree. You talk about
It's just a
peaceful
lot of
protests.
like,
Many
you
of
know,
those
it's just like
turned
it's
into
weird.
riots.
He's
Mr.
made
Vice
himself a
President,
good punching bag for everybody.
you say that people
by
who
not
commit
being
crimes
as,
should be held accountable. The question I have, though,
definable
is, as the Democratic
as
nominee, and
messaging.
earlier tonight you said that you are the Democratic Party right now, have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president. I've made it clear. I've made it clear in my public statements that the violence should be prosecuted. It should be prosecuted, and anyone who commits it.
But you've never called for the people, the leader. Excuse me, sir. You have never called for the leaders in Portland and in Oregon to bring in the National Guard and knock off 100 days of riots.
They can, in fact, take care of it if he just stay out of the way. Look here.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Here's the
But
thing.
no,
I sent in the
wait, I
U.S.
asked him a
Marshals to
question.
get the killer
No,
of the young man in the middle of the street. They shot him, and for 3
Trump
days...
sending
President
troops
Trump
into
is-
Portland
President
actually
Trump-
escalated the violence. It
Yeah.
did not
US
decrease
Marshals
it.
took care of
Did
it.
not
Go ahead,
decrease
sir.
it.
And by the way, you know, his own former spokesperson said, you know, riots and chaos and violence help his cause.
You know what I think any
That's what
average
this is all about.
I don't know
suburban
who said that.
swing voters
do.
thinking right now? I don't trust either of these
I think
guys to
Kellyanne
fix this problem.
Conway.
I don't think
That's
she
what they're
said.
She
thinking.
said that.
And
And
Most
Yeah,
people are
everyone-
just depressed by both
They're
candidates.
depressed
is
by
that
this.
that's
If
what
you're
he
like
is,
someone who
keep trying to
genuinely does
rile
not
everybody
know or
up.
is turned off by
He
both,
doesn't
you're like,
wanna
I hate
calm
both
things
parties.
down.
You're one of those people.
Instead of
I hate
going
both
Almost half of
and
Biden's
talking to
support is
people
just
and saying,
people who
"Let's
don't
get
like
everybody
Trump."
together, figure out how
Yeah.
to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly,
And-
every single solitary
Okay,
time.
and to end this, button up this segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir.
Exactly.
You have repeatedly
Trump's
criticized-
incendiary
answer
rhetoric
is
has
that-
worsened the
You have
violence.
repeatedly-
He has
you-
directly
no,
incited
you've been talking
violence.
back
He made
and
a
forth.
statement.
I'm asking
I don't
you-
know
would love to
about
know
that
that.
so much.
I would love to. And
I wouldn't give him too much credit for that.
We would very quickly.
Look
He
at
doesn't
the
make things better.
militias.
I don't know how much he can make
It would be
things
over.
worse.
There'd be
He
no
can definitely
problem.
fail
But
to
they
make
don't want
things
accept
better.
the National Guard.
You have repeatedly
the militias.
criticized the
We give
vice
him too
president
much
for not
credit
specifically
for
calling out
leaders matter,
Antifa
but
and other left-wing
right.
extremist
Wouldn't happen.
They feel
groups.
they are able to
you
come out
willing
in the open
tonight
because of
to
him.
condemn white supremacists
They're given a
and
platform.
militia
The
groups
QAnon people, for
and
instance.
to say
Your
that
causality's
they need to stand
backwards.
down and not
They were before him.
add
They
to
gave-
the
they made
violence
him.
in a number of these
They
cities.
came
They
out during
predate
the
him,
war
yes,
In
but they
Kenosha,
got a bigger
and as
platform
we've seen
because
in
of him,
Portland.
because he
Are you
refuses
prepared
to
do that?
specifically-
call them down.
This is a chicken and egg
I would say
situation.
almost
Like,
everything I see
I would
is from the left wing.
put
not
them
from the
before
right
him
wing.
What are
quite
you-
a
what are
bit.
you-
Yeah.
what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well,
peace.
then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to
More
call
political
him?
violence in the
What do you
United
wanna
States
call
is
him?
committed by
Give
the
me
right and the
supremacists
left.
Who would you like me to
This is true.
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand
FBI
by.
statistics.
But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left because this
I
is
don't know,
not
Portland
a
looks pretty
right
bad. Are they
wing
reporting
problem.
that?
This is a left wing.
All of the
This
Northwest.
is a left wing
Go ahead,
problem.
White
Go ahead, sir.
supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an
Antifa,
organization.
the left.
Not militia.
Antifa is not even a thing. The
That's
FBI investigated it. They found it was not a threat.
Well,
Antifa
then
is
you know
not an
now,
existing
We're done,
organization.
sir.
That's okay, but Simba, that's not like
It's
like-
that's not an idea.
It's like a gang.
Your administration tells
Like a
you
gang
the
doesn't have a
truth,
central
that's bad
organization either.
Can I tell you what?
You have no
That's literally
idea.
what a
mean it's
gang
not-
is.
Antifa
I'm
is
saying-
a dangerous
All right,
radical.
gentlemen.
Saying
we're
Antifa's
now
not a thing is
moving on to
not
Trump
on.
records.
They're definitely a thing.
Antifa is as much a thing as like
When
BLM.
the president seeks
Same
BLM
thing.
is more of a thing than
it
Antifa.
is generally a
And
referendum on
BLM
his
has an
record.
organization.
I mean,
President
there is
Biden, you like to
a
quote one of your
BLM
dad's
organization,
sayings,
but most
which is,
people are
"Don't
just
compare
saying
me to
BLM.
the
They're not part
Almighty,
of the BLM
compare me
organization.
to the
I'm saying that
alternative." And in
Antifa-
this case, sir, you are
The left saying Antifa is not a real problem,
Looking
not a winning
at
talking
both
point.
of your records,
It's definitely
I'm going
an
to ask
issue.
each of you,
No,
why Why
No,
should
false.
voters elect you president over your opponent? In this segment, President Trump, you go first, 2 minutes.
Because there
All
has
right.
never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done in a period of 3.5 years. And that's despite the impeachment hoax, And you saw what happened today with Hillary Clinton, where it was a whole big con job. But despite going through all of these things, where I had to fight both flanks and behind me and above, there has never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest, before COVID came in, the greatest economy in history, lowest unemployment numbers. Everything was good. Everything was going. And by the way, there was unity going to happen. People were calling me for the first time in years. They were
Which
calling,
was similar to the end
and
of the
they were saying,
Obama administration.
It's time, maybe. And then what happened? We got hit, but now we're building it back up again. A rebuilding of the military, including Space Force and all of the other things. A fixing of the VA, which was a mess.
The military was already overfunded.
308,000 people died because they didn't have proper health care.
Space Force was awesome.
A mess. And we now got a 91% approval rating at the VA, our vets. We take care of our vets. But we've rebuilt our military. The job that we've done, and I'll tell you something, some people say maybe the most important. By the end of the first term,
military was never gone.
Approximately 300 federal judges and Court of Appeals judges, 300, and hopefully 3 great Supreme Court justices. That is a
for conservatives. That is a real achievement.
Which very few
justices is probably the biggest
achievement.
achievement
I have so many judges.
Yeah.
Because President Obama and him left me 128 judges to fill. When you leave office, you don't leave any judges. That's like, you just don't do that. They left 128 openings.
Because Republicans
and if I were a
blocked them,
member of
yes.
his
Mitch
party,
McConnell.
because they have a little different philosophy, I'd say if you left us 128 openings, you can't be a good president. You can't be a good vice president. But I want to thank you because it gives us almost, it'll probably be above that number by the end of this
because Mitch
term.
McConnell blocked them.
300 judges. It's a record.
Looking at both your records, why should voters elect you president as opposed to President Trump? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did.
Good.
We left him a booming economy, and he caused the recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head-to-head with Putin and made it clear to him we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Your son got $3.5 million.
He's going into the Russiagate stuff.
Wait a minute. Mr. President,
That will
your
not fly.
campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted. Well, your side agreed to it.
Turn his mic off.
Why don't you observe what your campaign agreed to as a ground rule, okay, sir?
He never keeps his word. Can you add
No,
back
no,
He's
I'm
a
not
person
asking.
that's
That was a rhetorical question.
Can you
Go
add
ahead,
back
sir.
30 seconds?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
you may have.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, thirdly, we're poor. The billionaires have gotten much more wealthy by a tune of over $300 to $400 billion more just since COVID. You
Yes.
in the home, you got less. You're in more trouble than you were before. In terms of
Billions of
being
dollars have
more
been
violent,
transferred from the bottom
when we were in
50% to the
office,
top
there were
1%.
15%
We're gonna do a
less
video on this soon,
violence
by
in
the way.
America than there is today. He's president of the United States. It's on his watch. And with regard to more divided, the nation can't stay divided. We can't be this way. And speaking of my son, the way you talk about the military, the way you talk about them being losers and being and just being suckers, my son was in Iraq. He spent a year there.
This is a good argument to make.
He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser.
Because you
He
voted to
was
send
a
him there, but
patriot,
yes.
and the people
Yeah,
left
you did.
behind there were heroes. And I resent
Are you talking
like
about
hell.
Hunter? Are you talking about
I'm
Hunter?
talking about my son.
Yes,
Bo
now
Biden.
Joe Biden's getting
I know,
angry.
I know,
Finally.
I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter
you know,
got
well-
thrown. Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He
For
wasn't dishonorably.
cocaine use. And he didn't have a job until you became vice president. Once you
None of
became
that
vice
is
president,
true.
he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
That is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
He
My
made
son,
a fortune.
My son.
And he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he
I'm proud of
given
my
tens
son.
of millions
All right.
But he
dollars?
wasn't given
All right.
tens of
He
millions
was
of
given
dollars. That
tens
is
of
totally,
millions of
that's
dollars.
been totally
President Trump,
discredited.
you've already been
Totally discredited.
We've already been through this. I think the American people would rather hear about more substantial subjects. Well,
You think he's getting aggressive enough, Arjun?
I'm going to make a judgment call here.
He's just saying it's not true. He's got to give the alternative narrative. He's got to give the explanation. It sounds lying. He's not lying. It has been debunked. It is a debunked conspiracy theory. The whole Ukraine scandal, the fake one.
I'd like to talk about climate change.
He's just not explaining it.
The forest fires in the West are raging now. They have
needs a
burned
counter-narrative.
millions of
He's
acres.
only responding to
They
Trump.
have
He's
displaced hundreds of
reactive,
thousands
not
of people.
proactive.
When state officials
he's
there
gotta be more
blame the
proactive.
fires on climate change,
I don't
Mr.
know.
President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records.
I just want someone who can still get it up,
about
you
the
know?
science of climate change and
Like,
what
no,
will you
that's
do
literally it.
in
Like,
the
I
next
just
4 years
saw
to
the
confront
point.
it?
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint.
Yeah,
And
someone
people
can send
are
a link in the
actually
chat
very
about
happy
how
about
it's been
what's going on,
debunked.
because our businesses are doing well. As far as the fires are concerned, you
They
need
fired the
forest management
prosecutor,
in addition to
like,
everything else.
before
The forest floors
anything
are
like that
loaded up
happened.
with trees, dead trees.
And it was already
that are
part of a
years
bigger
old, and they're like
anti-corruption
tinder,
thing.
and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette in there, the whole forest burns down. You've got to
I'll
have
find a
forest
link.
management.
What do you
You've got to have
believe?
cuts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
I believe that we have to do everything we can to have immaculate air, immaculate water, and do whatever else we can that's good. You know, we're planting 1 billion trees, the Billion Tree Project, and it's very
Do you
exciting
believe
for a lot of people.
that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of this
I think
planet?
a lot of things do, but I think to an extent, yes. I think to an extent, yes. But I also think we have to do better management of our forests. Every year, I get the call, California's burning.
And what's his policy?
California's burning. If that was cleaned, if you had forest management, good forest management, you wouldn't be getting those calls. You know, in Europe, they have forest cities. They're called forest cities. They maintain their forests. They manage their forests. I was with the head of a major country. It's a forest city. He said, sir, we have trees that are far more, they ignite much easier than
Finland.
California. There shouldn't be that problem. I spoke with the governor about it. I'm getting along very well with the governor. But I said, you know, at some point, you can't every year have hundreds of thousands of acres of land just burned to the ground.
But, sir,
that's burning down because of a lack of
But,
management.
sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Why have you relaxed fuel economy standards that are going to create more pollution from cars
Well,
and
not
trucks?
really, because what's happening is the car is much less expensive and it's a much
Seems
safer
Chris
car.
Wallace
And
is
you're
a
talking
stronger
about a
debater
time
than Joe
difference, and
Biden
then
in
what
this
would
debate, to be
happen
quite
Yeah,
honest.
is the
Chris
cost of the
Wallace
car,
has balls.
You would have at least double and triple
Chris
the
Wallace
number
for
of cars
president.
purchased. We have the old slugs out there that are 10, 12 years old. If you did that, the car would be safer. It would be much cheaper by
But in the case of
$3,500.
California, they've simply
No, but you
ignored
would take a lot of cars
rollback.
off the market because people would be able to afford a car. Now, and by the way, we're going to see how that turns out. But a lot of people agree with me, many people. The car has gotten so expensive because they have computers all over the place for an extra little bit of gasoline. And, and I'm okay with electric cars, too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
Vice President Biden, I'd like you to respond to the president's climate change record, but I also want to ask you about a concern. You proposed $2 trillion in green jobs. You talk
very
about
large word
new
salad,
limits, not
essentially.
abolishing, but new
This
limits
guy's,
on
like, not
fracking,
there.
ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050.
Biden has the most
president
ambitious
says
climate change
a lot
program of
these
any
things
president.
would tank the economy and
running.
cost millions of jobs.
He's absolutely wrong, number one. Number two, if in fact, during our administration, the Recovery Act, I was able to bring down the cost of renewable
You guys have any questions
energy
about climate
to
change?
cheaper than or as cheap as
Misconceptions?
coal and
Misunderstandings?
gas and oil. Nobody's going to build another coal-fired plant in America. No one's going to build another oil-fired plant in America. They're going to move to renewable energy, number one. Number two, we're going to make sure that we are able to take the federal fleet and turn it into a fleet that's run on their electric vehicles. Making sure that we can do that, we're going to put 500,000 charging stations and all of the highways that we're going to be building in the future. We're going to build an economy that, in fact, in a way that, in fact, they'll emit significantly less gas and oil because the heat will not be going out. There's so many things that we can do now to create thousands and thousands of jobs. We can get to net zero in terms of energy production by 2035. Not
Yes,
only
link
costing
green
people
energy
jobs,
to jobs.
creating
That's a good
jobs,
idea.
creating millions of good-paying jobs, not $15 an hour, but prevailing
Exactly.
wage.
Green New Deal.
By having a new infrastructure that, in fact, is green. And the first thing I will do, I will rejoin the Paris Accord. I will join the Paris Accord because with us out of it, look what's happening. It's all falling apart. And talk about someone who has no
Green New Deal was already passed
relationship
in Europe.
with foreign policy. Brazil, the rainforests of Brazil are being torn down, are being ripped down. More carbon is absorbed in that rainforest than every bit of carbon that's emitted in the United States. Instead of doing something about that, I would be gathering up and making sure we had the countries of the world coming up with $20 billion and say, here's $20 billion. Stop tearing down the forest.
And tell us your thoughts for the live stream.
Significant economic
I don't even
consequences.
know
What about
where
the
to
argument
begin.
that President Trump basically says that you have to
What do you think
balance
about their performance?
environmental interests and economic interests, and he's drawn his line?
No,
Well,
I thought
drawn a
hope
line. He still, for
could-
example, makes
I
sure
thought
that he
hope
wants to
was
make
a
sure
word that
methane's not a
could
problem.
maybe be
You
applicable
can now emit more methane
to our
without it being a
situation.
problem. Methane. This is a guy who says that you don't
But
have to
after
have
I
mileage
don't
standards
even-
for automobiles that exist now.
Hope
This is
would
a
be
guy who
considered
says that.
fraudulent to
The
even
fact
try.
is-
You don't think Biden's doing a good job?
It's all true. And here's the
Talking
deal.
about the Green
Hey,
New
What is a
Deal,
good
and
job
it's not too
This is an American voter, guys.
As you said,
This is an American voter live in the flesh.
rip down buildings and rebuild the building. It's
Are they
the
appealing to the
most
black vote?
ridiculous.
That is
Where
the whole
airplanes
discussion.
That's the black vote, yeah.
where two-car
What was
systems
that?
are out, where they
Not
want to
true.
take out the cows too.
Did anyone, like,
That's not true
Did
either,
anything
right?
different? Did anything
This
new?
is
Was
a
anything new or
100
different said?
That's more
No,
money
no,
than
no,
our country
no.
could make in
So,
100
yeah.
years if we're
Not
going
the case.
All right, let me
Oh,
because I actually, wait a minute, sir. I actually have studied your plan, and it includes upgrading 4 million buildings, weatherizing 2 million homes over 4 years, building 1.5 million energy efficient
It's like a game, though.
homes.
No, it is.
So the question
like
becomes,
it is.
the
Like it's like
president is saying, I
like
think some
besides
people who support the
anti-fascism, which
president
is
would
obviously
say
what it
that
stands for. Like
sounds like
there
it's going
has
to cost a lot
been
of money and hurt the
a
economy.
What
like a
it's going to do is going to
selected
create
group of
thousands
individuals
and
who
millions
have
of
taken
jobs,
them on
good-paying jobs.
Well, let me finish, sir.
and use
Yes,
that.
But it's about scale.
enact
It's about
different acts.
scale.
I will
The fact is,
admit
it's
to
going to
that.
create millions of
But
good-paying
that's
jobs.
still not the
and
same
these tax
thing
incentives to people, for
as
people to
what
weatherize,
a
which he
lot
wants
of
to get.
Yeah, it's not like an organized.
Right.
It's gonna
Yeah,
make the
right.
economy much safer. Look how much we're
Yeah.
paying.
Far right militias
to
are
deal
far
with
more
the
numerous,
hurricanes,
far
to
better
deal
armed, and
with-
far
by the
more
way, He has an
organized.
answer for hurricanes. He said maybe we should drop a nuclear weapon on them. They may.
I never said that
That's
at all.
what he did say.
You made it up.
And here's the deal.
You make up a-
we are going to be in a position where we can create
We'll be fine.
hard,
We'll get through this.
hard, good jobs by making sure the environment is clean and we all are in better shape. We spend billions of dollars now. Billions of dollars on floods, hurricanes, rising seas. We're in real trouble. Look what's happened just in the Midwest with these storms that come through and wipe out entire sections and counties in Iowa. That didn't happen before. They're because of global warming. We make up 15% of the world's problem. We, in fact, but the rest of the world, we've got to get them to come along. That's why we have to get back into the Paris Accord.
All right, gentlemen,
Wait a minute, Chris. So why didn't he do it for 47
The
years?
Paris
You were
Agreement.
vice president. Why didn't you get the world? China sends up real dirt into the air. Russia does. India does. They all do. We're supposed to be good. And by the way, He made
Joe
a couple
Biden
of
passed one of the
statements.
first
The Green
climate
New
change
Deal
bills, in
is
case you guys didn't know
$100
that.
trillion,
That is
not
not
20
my
billion.
plan.
That's
The Green-
Joe Biden's
we
record on
will
climate change is
never
actually
stop
not too
my
bad,
plan.
surprisingly.
If he knew anything
Wait a
about,
minute, wait.
if he knew
Gentlemen?
He
anything
made a
about,
statement about the military. He said I said something about the military. He and his friends made it up, and then they went with it. I never said it.
Okay.
That is
What
not
he
true.
did
Sir,
is he
you're done in
said
this segment.
he called
Mr.
the
Vice-
military
Mr. Vice President,
stupid bastards.
I
and he
did
said
not
it on
say
tape.
that.
He said
Mr.
stupid
Please,
bastards. He
not-
said it.
Stop.
I would never
I
say
would
that.
Play
to the military.
it. Play it.
Go ahead. Mr.
You're on
Vice
tape.
President answered his final question.
The final question is, I can't remember which of all his rantings. was the
I'm
final question.
having a little trouble myself, but and about the economy and about this question of what it's going to cost.
The economy.
I mean, the Green New Deal and the idea of what your
the
environmental
Green New
changes will
Deal-
do.
The Green New Deal will pay for itself as we move forward. We're not going to build plants that, in fact, are great polluting plants.
So do you
We're going to
support
build
the Green New Deal?
Pardon me?
Do you support that?
No, I don't support the Green
Oh,
New
you
Deal.
don't? Oh, well, that's a
You
big
let-
statement.
I
That
support
means you
the
just
Biden-
lost the radical left.
I
Done.
support
you
the
don't.
Biden plan that I put forward.
Okay.
The Biden plan, which is different than what he calls the radical Green
The
New
Biden
Deal.
plan.
Radical left.
Final segment.
Oh, God.
Election integrity. As we meet tonight, millions of Americans are receiving mail-in ballots. or
Funnily enough,
vote
his
early.
VP supports
How
a Green New Deal. I'm
confident
surprised
should
Trump
we
didn't say
be
that.
that this will
Said
be
a
a
I
Green
fair
mean,
New
election?
it's
And
all the
what are you
terminology. The Green New Deal
prepared to
itself
do
was actually
over the
mostly
next 5
a framework.
Only
It
good
wasn't
news,
an actual
because
policy.
not
it was a-
only be
it was a
election day,
resolution.
but also
It was a
counting
resolution.
some ballots,
It was not
mail-in
an
ballots
actual
after
policy, so
election
you guys
day.
know,
What
especially
are you
non-American
prepared
viewers.
to do to
Yeah.
reassure the American people
It was like
that
a-
the next
it
president
was like
will be the
a
legitimate
mission statement.
winner
Exactly.
of this
Green New
election?
Deal was not a
AOC
policy.
Final
and like
segment,
some
Mr.
other
Vice President,
sponsor.
you go first.
Prepared to let people vote. They should go to iwillvote.com.
And Pelosi didn't
decide
let it even
how
go
they're
up.
going to vote, when they're going to vote, and what means by which they're going to vote. His own Homeland Security Director, and as well as the FBI Director, says there is no evidence at all that mail-in ballots are a source of being manipulated and cheating. They said that. The fact is that there are going to be millions of people because of COVID that are going to be voting by mail-in ballots.
All
like
right,
he
election
does.
integrity.
There we go,
He sits
baby.
behind
Red
the
Mirage
Wisconsin
scenario,
Consensus
guys.
ballot
Red
to
Mirage
Florida.
is the most
Number
likely
one. Number
scenario for
two,
the election.
We're going to make sure that those people who want to vote in person are able to vote because enough poll watchers are there to make sure they can socially distance. The polls are open on time, and the polls stay open until the votes are counted. And this is all about trying to dissuade people from voting because he's trying to
Voter suppression will be an issue. Voter intimidation will be an issue.
Show up and vote. You will determine.
Trump
the outcome
supporters
of
have
this
already
election.
intimidated
Vote,
voters who
vote,
attempted to vote
If you're
early.
able
This
to
is
vote early in
already
your state,
happening.
Vote early. If you're able to vote in person,
Voter
vote in
intimidation is
person,
already
vote whatever
happening
way is
for
the
early
best way
voting.
for you, because you will. He cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election. And in terms of whether or not, when the votes are counted and they're all counted, that will be accepted. If I win, that will be accepted. If I lose, that'll be accepted. But by the way,
I like this.
if in fact he says he's
Love
not
this a
sure
lot.
what he's going to accept, well, let me tell you something. It doesn't matter, because if we get the votes, it's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote. Just make sure you understand you have it in your control to determine what this country is going to look like the next 4 years.
very good.
Is it going to change? Or you get 4 more years of
Yes.
these lies.
Very reassuring.
Mr.
That's what we
President,
need.
2 minutes.
So when I listened to Joe talking about a transition, there's been no transition from when I won. I won that election. And if you look at crooked Hillary Clinton, if you look at all of the different people, there was no transition, because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I
God.
won, and even before I won, from the day I came down the escalator with our First Lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country. And we've caught them. We've caught them all. We've got it all on tape. We've caught them all. And by the way, you gave the idea for the Logan Act against General Flynn. You better take a look at that, because we caught you in a sense. And President
Trying
Obama
to
was
his
sitting
first
in the
campaign
office. He
reveal
knew about
video.
it too. So don't tell me about a free transition. As far as the ballots are concerned, it's a disaster. A solicited ballot, okay, solicited is okay. You're soliciting, you're asking, they send it back, you send it back. I did that. If you have an unsolicited, they're sending millions of ballots all over the country. There's fraud. They found them in creeks. They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. The other thing, it's nice on November 3rd, you're watching and you see who won the election. And I think we're going to do well.
I'm in North Carolina.
The election.
I'm in North, but
He's
it
trying
happened.
to rile up his supporters.
We might not know.
It's a fraction of a fraction of a
these
fraction.
ballots are going to be all over.
Voter fraud is not voter fraud is not statistically significant to affect the election results.
But these things are just so that people know they're not lies. They're just blown up.
Won or lost with that. They're losing 30 and 40%. It's a fraud and it's a shame. And can you imagine where they say you have to have your ballot in by November 10th? November 10th. That means
there could be social
7 days
unrest
after
following the election if
in
Trump
theory,
refuses to
should have been
accept the
announced.
result.
Okay.
We have major states with that,
sir,
all run by
2
Democrats.
minutes is 2 minutes.
All run by Democrats. It's
President
a
Trump,
it's a rigged election.
you're going to be able to continue. You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a
The deadline to certify
disaster.
elections is December 12th. It's only been since cable TV with expected results on election night. That's a new development.
31 million people voted mail-in voting. That was a quarter, more than a quarter of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I don't think I hope we don't need them in terms of the election itself. But for the ballots, I think so.
Supermajority on the
Because
Supreme
what's
Court could
happening is
decide in
incredible.
favor of
I
Trump.
read today where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them. We don't like them. We don't like them.
But
they
what are you
throw
going to
them
do
out
about it?
left
If there
and
are
right.
millions of ballots going out
What
right
you
now,
do
what
is
are
you
gonna
go
do?
and vote. You do a solicited ballot,
No,
and that's
I
okay,
know
or
your
you go and
complaint.
vote.
I'm asking you about the fact that millions of people
You go and vote. You go and
No,
vote
but
like
what I'm
they,
saying is, what are
like
you
they
gonna do
used
about
to
the
in
fact
the
that
old.
millions of people?
You either do, Chris, a solicited ballot where you're sending it in, they're sending it back, and you're sending. They have mailmen with lots of it. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia. Mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country.
There is no.
This is not.
There is no.
This is not
evidence of
going to
that.
end well.
There is
Okay.
no
This
evidence
is
of that.
not going to.
Why has he even mentioned Project Veritas yet?
Mail-in ballots for the last.
I hope he doesn't when he
decade or
I'm
more.
surprised he hasn't.
5, including 2 Republican states. And you don't have to solicit the ballot. It's sent to you. It's sent to your home. What we're saying is, they're saying is that it has to be a postmark by the time, by Election Day. If it doesn't get in till the 7th, 8th, 9th, it still should be counted. He's just afraid of counting the votes because he knows
You're
the
wrong.
outcome.
You're
No,
wrong.
I want to continue with you on
I
this,
love
Vice President Biden. Because
Chris, he's so wrong when he makes a statement like that.
Excuse me. Vice President Biden, the biggest problem, in fact, over the years with mail-in voting.
Trump could
has
win in
not
a
been
landslide
flawed
on the first
historically.
day, and
It has
mail-in
been
ballots
that
would come in several days
sizable
later.
numbers, sometimes
for
hundreds
Biden.
of
I don't think he
thousands
will
of ballots
landslide
are
the
thrown
first
out
day.
because they have not been properly
Think about it, if
filled out,
70%
or
of
there is
mail-in
some
ballots
other
are Democrat.
irregularity, or they missed
be fraud.
the deadline. So the question I have is, are you concerned that the Supreme Court with a Justice Barrett will settle any dispute?
My
I'm
take's 10
concerned
times
any
younger
court
and
would
way
settle
more
this because
tired than
here's the deal.
Biden.
When you
I need some of
file-
Biden's
when you
sauce.
get a ballot
Those
and
are
you fill
fighting
it out,
words, my friend.
You're supposed to have an affidavit. If you didn't know, you have someone say that this is me. You should be able to, if in fact you can verify that's you when before the ballot is thrown out, that's sufficient to be able to count the ballot because someone made a mistake
Yes,
and not
unfriendly Jack, you're
dotting
right.
the correct I. Who
The
they
most likely
voted for,
scenario points to
testify,
civil
say
unrest
who they voted
following
for,
the election. I've
say it's
seen
you. That is
the war
totally
games that were
legitimate.
performed.
All right.
Excuse me, Chris, when you
I
have
have a
80
final-
million
Yes,
ballots,
I have a
war
final
games were
Senate and
question.
swamping the system.
you've-
You
Oh,
know
God.
it can't be done. You know it can't.
Every
And
scenario
already
points to
it's been
social
so-
unrest.
Mail
Just
service
final-
delivers
wait a minute, gentlemen. In the
185
final
million
question
people
is,
a day.
in
million
8
ballots.
states, we can keep talking.
It's
in 8
it's a
states,
disgrace.
election
You know what I
workers
know what
are
everyone knows.
prohibited currently by law, 8 states, from even beginning to process ballots, even take them out of the envelopes and
Yes.
flatten them until Election Day. That means that it's likely, because there's going to be a huge increase in mail-in balloting, that we are not going to know on election night who the winner is. That it
This
could
is
be
the Ray
Premise Trump
Mirage
is dead.
scenario.
Could be months.
until
Trump
we
looks
find out who
pretty mad.
the new president is.
He's
so
pissed.
first
Oh.
for you, sir,
Look at
finally
his mouth.
for the vice president, I hope neither of you will interrupt the other. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm
Could be
during
months.
this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will
Trump
not
will
declare
not.
victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you
I'm
go first.
urging my supporters to go into the polls
Trump will declare
and
victory
watch
on day
very
one.
carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very
Fuck.
safe, very nice thing.
They will be
No,
voter intimidation.
he's encouraging voter intimidation. This guy's
You know why?
Yes,
This is
voter
not good.
intimidation.
This is terrible.
Philadelphia, bad things. And I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election.
Good.
If it's a fair
You're urging
election,
them what?
I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell
what-
you
what
what,
does that
from
mean,
a
not go
common
along?
sense,
Does that mean
I'll
you're gonna
tell you
tell
what
your
it means.
people to take to
It
the
means you
street?
have a fraudulent election. You're
And what are
sending
you
out
gonna do?
80
And
million
what would you
ballots.
do
He's
about
setting
that?
the
They're not equipped
stage
to-
for a
These
disputed
people aren't equipped to
election.
handle it.
There is going to
Number
be
one.
civil
Number two,
unrest in the
they
United
cheat.
States.
They cheat. Hey, they found ballots in a waste paper basket 3 days ago, and they all had the name military ballots. They were military. They all had the name Trump on them.
Vice President
think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question.
There's
for you.
9
Will
ballots,
you urge
and it was
your
investigated.
supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge
7 out of 9
not
of
to
them.
declare
7 out of 9 of
victory
them.
until the election is independently certified?
Yes, and here's the deal. We count the ballots, as you pointed out. Some of these ballots in some states can't even be opened until Election Day. And if there's thousands of ballots, it's going to take time to do it. And by the way, our military, they've been voting by ballots since at the end of the Civil War, in effect. And that's what's going to happen. Why was it not? Why is it for them somehow
Now,
not
CX, you're
fraudulent?
right. The map will
It's
be
the
very
same
red
process.
on election day. Red
It's
mirage. It'll
honest.
be a red
No one
mirage.
has established at
Trump
all
will have a
that
landslide
there is
victory on day one. He will
fraud
declare
related to
victory.
mail-in
And as the mail-in
ballots,
ballots come in,
that
Biden
somehow
will
it's a fraudulent
likely
process.
take the lead, and that will lead to a period of social unrest because Trump will declare victory on day one, most likely.
They have no idea what
Vice
happened.
President Biden, go ahead.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the deal. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome, and I'll be a president not just for the Democrats. I'll be a president for Democrats and Republicans. And this guy,
I want to
in
see an
fact,
honest ballot count.
Gentlemen, you say that's the end of
Chris,
it? This is the
I
end
wanna
of
see
this
an
debate?
honest ballot count.
We're
And I
going to
think
leave
he
it
does
there.
too.
To be continued as in more debates as we go on. President Trump, Vice President Biden, it's been an interesting hour and a half. I want to thank you both for participating in the first of 3 debates that you have agreed to engage in. We want to thank Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic for hosting this event. The next debate, sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, will be 1 week from tomorrow, October 7th, at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. The 2 vice presidential nominees, Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris, will debate at 9 p.m. Eastern that night.
All
We hope
right,
you
tell us,
watch.
guys, who do you
Until
think
then,
has
thank
won
you.
this debate? Was
good
it
night.
Joe Biden? Was it Donald
Well, it is hard
Trump?
to know where to start. I'm not sure how people are going to feel about that to be continued.
Tell us
at
right
the
here
end.
in the chat.
And people have to make their own judgments about how the candidates handled themselves.
All right,
tonight,
guys, that was
who
it.
made
That was the
better case, who
debate.
offered
That was the
plans for the
debate.
future, who told the
Please
truth,
put in the chat,
and
type
who deserves to
Biden
be
if you think
president.
that
Those are all
Biden won the
judgments that are gonna be
debate.
made over the next
Type
several days
Trump
and
if
weeks.
you
But I
think
have to
that
speak
Trump
personally
won the debate.
here as somebody who's watched presidential debates.
Yeah, is that Melania? Who's that?
Oh, yeah, that's Melania. Who else would it be? All right. Guys, this was it. All right, so Arjun, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the debate? Who do you think won?
I think the American people lost.
The American people lost. I personally think that Chris Wallace has won the debate. I declare it so.
I think Biden won, to be honest. I didn't like it, but like he probably did win.
I think Biden gained strength towards the end, but generally speaking, Biden was too weak. Honestly, I think most people, as you said before, just looked at both candidates and became depressed.
As you can see, my two roommates came in. They're like, "Oh my god, like I hate this." Like that's just the number one thing I hear. I have to talk to swing voters. I've had to talk to swing voters because of campaigns, and I'm talking to a swing voter because of a school project, and I interview every week. And the number one thing I hear is just just Trump is intolerable to her, but
Yeah.
Biden does nothing for her. She's like, I find him completely uninteresting. I don't even know what this guy's about. This guy, like, I just don't care about him. You know, like
Exactly.
she's a lifelong Republican, and I have to do a phone interview with her every week for like a class project, and she's gonna vote for Biden probably, but not because she likes Biden, just because like Trump has really turned her off.
People
She's
are
an educated
only
suburban
voting
lady.
for Biden because they hate Trump. It's only to stop Trump. It's all negative partisanship.
It's really shocking. It really is shocking how bad it's gotten. Because if you remember like Obama, you don't remember Obama. We don't remember Obama. We're pretty young. But Obama, I'll tell you, my parents really liked Obama. My parents were excited to vote for Obama. They donated to Obama. Yeah, like it was exciting. People loved that guy. And even with like Hillary Clinton, I would say there was like people like in retrospect, people say, "Oh, I just wanted her because to beat Trump," but like people liked her.
No, actually,
No, like
not.
early on, people are forgetting she won the primary in a very specific sort of way. She had enthusiasm among a lot of the base. Like people like to say everyone hated her. Maybe as the campaign went on and the news came out and the emails and everything, but like in the primary, she was not well.
Some
she was not
people
poorly
like the
regarded.
idea of Hillary Clinton and a female president, and also most people were wary of what they perceive as a radical left candidate with Bernie Sanders, and there was a little bit of funny business as well. But
Okay, Hillary Clinton won democratically. This is a myth that the superdelegate's candidate to her. I don't like Hillary Clinton. I voted for Bernie in the primaries this year, but like this whole leftist. This is the problem with the Bernie guys, the Bernie bros. Like nothing. They're almost as bad as the Trump people that like anytime they lose, it's because it's like the DNC agenda, the pulling the strings.
but here's
It's
the
not
thing,
the
like,
case.
it's not
There's
that- it's
not
not-
that much. There's
it's
not that
it's
much
the
support
only
for him.
thing. It's not the only thing, but I think it's quite clear that, especially more so, I think in 2016 than in 2020. 2020, it was actually more fair, but in 2016, it was quite clear that in certain
The
areas, I think
DNC liked her better.
there were instances, in fact, in Nevada, I think, where in the caucuses, where in fact certain votes were not counted. And then on the other side, of course, it was openly admitted by Donna Brazile that the DNC was on the side of Hillary Clinton, that she received debate questions. It was a
biased. Big, and you know who else was on the side of Hillary Clinton? The black community, the black vote. The Biden lost because he could not sway black voters. This is the number one reason Bernie lost because Biden's pretty popular with black voters. Bernie lost both this time and last time because of black voters. You know who handed Biden the election this time? One of the former chairmen of the Congressional Black Caucus, James Clyburn.
Yes, Jim Clyburn. As soon as he was endorsed in South Carolina, that was the moment for Biden.
So
In any case, back to the debate. Debate. Essentially, I think main takeaways, I think very few people will be swayed by this debate. Most people will only become more depressed about the state of the election, to be quite honest. But again, the vast majority, I think upwards of 90% of people have already decided who they're going to vote for. This will not change. This will not change the state of the race. It's only the fundamentals of the race that will determine. The fundamentals, as I've said, laid out in previous videos, it's the economy, it's the coronavirus, it's the protests and social unrest, and it is voter suppression. Those are the only things that are going to determine this election. Everything else is just eye candy.
It's noise.
Tax returns, not going to matter. Joe Biden not being able to speak, not going to matter. None of this matters. It is the fundamentals of the economy, the coronavirus, the social unrest, voter suppression, and of course, after the election, the very likely prospect of a disputed election, a contested election, social unrest, and a legal dispute, which God forbid could go to a Supreme Court, and God forbid could go to a Supreme Court that is 6-3 conservative appointed judges to liberal.
Remember though, we don't want to like just say just because it's like, you know, as bad as things are, we don't want to say just because it's a conservative Supreme Court they're going to hand it to Trump. Bush v. Gore
it's
was
not one-to-one.
It's Bush v. Gore is very, very different than this would be. It had a lot of particularities. You just don't, it would depend on what the issue at hand is, what the litigation is.
That is true. We don't know how or what particular aspect or even which state the election could be disputed in terms of a legal dispute. We don't know.
And it could be
but
done at the state Supreme
these are the
Courts.
cards that are on the table, essentially.
Like it doesn't necessarily have to go to the Supreme Court. It could be at the state Supreme Courts and not be appealed. Like, I mean, I don't see the Trump campaign not moving it up until they win, or like the Supreme Court's the last avenue. So I'd imagine something goes to the Supreme Court this year, but you know, not necessarily. He might just be strategic and choose the one he needs the most, and we'll see what happens.
No, indeed. No, it doesn't have to be the Supreme Court. And of course, we could have possibly multiple litigations in a variety of different states. I mean, of course, in the year 2000, it was in Florida. But this year, it could be, you know, maybe in one of these Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, whichever one of these states. It could be in multiple states.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona. Just you name it. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, no, it's gonna be messy. I mean, like, I think we're gonna know who the president is, like, after a few days, because like there's a point where you can just call it, but they're not gonna declare victory for a while. But like, we'll know who won the vote counts, because like there's a point where like you can, before like things got crazy, like in 2016, like they used to call the vote counts pretty early, because there's a point where you reach like the margin of error is like, you just can't change that much, you know, like you get a statistical like sample and you can draw a conclusion pretty fast. So they used to be able to call elections very quickly. They're probably not going to do that this year, but we'll know. No,
indeed. So I would say buckle up. And well, we saw the debate. So tell me in the chat, guys, would you like to see us do another live stream of the next presidential debate, or possibly also the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence? So just type in a yes in the live chat if you'd like to see us do another live stream of either of the debates that are coming up.
Yeah, I'm yes. Bombs in Yemen.
Yes. We're getting a very loud yes from Bombs in Yemen.
Biden is fundamentally different from Bernie policy-wise with CX. Let's serve two hacks.
Oh, that is true.
That's true. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, no, I voted for Bernie. I don't think that, like, I get irritated with Bernie people a lot just because they're wrong so much about the fundamentals of the electorate and how they work and what they think. This whole myth that
it depends. Obviously, more people did vote for Biden in the end, but
more people.
I think in terms of it, it's less about open rigging and it's more about structural disadvantages in terms of the media coverage. I mean, I think there was a whole documentary
Media's
about
not
this.
that negative about. Was that?
It's not even about negative. It's about lack of coverage.
Sure.
So there was a whole entire documentary about the Bernie blackout, which detailed sort of the lack of coverage during the Democratic.
You know who actually got blacked out? Andrew Yang.
Certainly not just Bernie. Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, indeed. These kind of candidates.
I'm saying, like, I feel like Bernie got a healthy amount of attention. Okay, it seems like we're wrapping up soon.
All right.
Neat. Yeah, very depressing night.
Yeah, not all that eventful, guys. Well, as I said before the debate, there wasn't really all that much to expect. Probably went a little worse for Biden than I thought. I thought he would have had a little bit more energy in him. He did improve towards the end of the debate. But I hope you guys enjoyed and don't get too depressed about the state of American politics. There is stuff going around the world. There is right now a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I am editing the video as we speak. And so that should be coming up very, very soon. So make sure you guys turn on notifications because we have more videos. We have more of my take coming up this week, next week, and every week, as long as you guys stay subscribed. All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. All right, we're off.